You thought you were listening to Animation Dissection, but it was me, Dio! Alright,
Fall
so...
off your horse.
Yes. So, welcome to another episode of Animation Dissection. Today we are going to be discussing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Here, of course, I am Neeksy with Zorak.
Holy shit!
And we have a super special, awesome guest, HulkaMatt.
Oh my god!
So, but before we get into the show, let's do a bit of animation news.
So I've got a bit of animation news this week because there was a bunch of random animation news coming out of Anime Expo, as not that surprising, and also the new anime season starting, so there's a few things tied to that. I believe, actually, Little Witch Academia 2 is actually out.
Yes,
Like,
I
out.
just got it last night, watched it,
Yeah.
loved it.
I have yet to watch it. I should have a digital copy probably sitting in my email. What's the deal with the physical copies? I presume they haven't mailed it out yet.
No, and the way you get your digital copy is it's hosted on Vimeo. They give you a password, and the password changes daily. But the passwords, and I think the Vimeo version expires after, I think, July 11th or something like that. And then I think it's just, distributed otherwise.
That's a silly approach, but whatever. Okay.
Probably saves a lot on server costs.
Sure, I guess. Another thing tied to that is that apparently they're making an Inferno Cop Little Witch Academia crossover short.
Holy shit!
I know.
Oh
I can only imagine how that's going to work out. As avowed Inferno Cop fans, that sounds amazing.
I want to see a Turning Girls one with the with Little Witch. That would be a really good crossover.
Trigger has no respect for Turning Girls. I'm sorry to say. Like, it's been asked, like, yeah, you guys should do more stuff with that, and they're like, oh, a bunch of accountants made that, so apparently they have no respect for that thing.
Which is weird because it was kind of genuinely brilliant, especially
it was amazing.
The terrible what was her name? She's like the frog based,
like Kaoru-chan,
Kaoru-chan or something like that, right? Like she's just like
yeah.
frog. Which is just, that was probably one of the best episodes where it's her trying to live stream. Anyway, but a crossover with that as well.
Have you been following the other thing that they have going right now? They actually have like their own pseudo Inferno Cop going right now called Ninja Slayer from Animation.
No, I haven't seen that.
I have not been watching. I've been hearing word that it's pretty funny in that it basically has animation, like actual animated action, and then it'll immediately, like after like a frame, go straight into like Inferno Cop level animation.
Oh, good.
It's kind of doing it pseudo seriously, but not really. So I hear it's worth checking out. I have yet to yet. I'm hoping to do so relatively soon because I presume it's wrapping up now that the spring season's ending.
Where is it, on Crunchyroll, or where do you watch that?
I have no idea. I neglected to look that up. I presume it's somewhere where people can find it online, one way or the other.
And what's the name of it again?
Ninja Slayer from Animation. I would also just recommend folks check out on YouTube. You can find Inferno Cop and Turning Girls. They're just two. There's a bunch. There's like 20 something, or no, like I think Turning Girls is like 6 to 8 episodes or something.
And each episode's only a few minutes long.
Right.
It's basically, what if Japan had the Adult Swim style humor?
Right. And it's also weird. It's interesting that it's basically being written by a bunch of women on the Studio Trigger staff that aren't actually animators or production staff, from what I understand it. I believe the actors are all also just that, and I think the animation is also done like by an accountant or something. That this might be entirely apocryphal, this production story, but if I remember correctly, that's what people have said to me, and I believe them wholeheartedly because it is very unconventional and interesting. And Studio Trigger has it up actually on their own on YouTube with English subtitles that they did, and the English subtitles are pretty good. And same thing with Inferno Cop. Inferno Cop is like a pastiche of sort of 80s action, but there's no animation in it whatsoever. It's actually just paper cutouts.
Well,
essentially,
it's motion graphics. It's animation along the lines of what you would have seen with like early Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
It's worse than that.
Well, it's worse than that,
but it's also better than that.
Yeah, it's weird, but
it's so bad that it's really, really good.
It's intentionally. Everything about it is intentional.
The writing of it is also really, really, really dumb in a brilliant way.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's easily the best thing. That and Turning Girls are easily the best thing that Studio Trigger's produced. And they've really disappointed me as of late. So there you go.
Yeah.
Other things coming out there is that in terms of U.S. releases, Utena, Revolutionary Girl Utena, a show we need to talk about sometime, is getting a Blu-ray release. I believe between Noizumi Entertainment and Right Stuff are localizing it. We had a DVD release for this, a re-release rather, about I think in like 2008, 2009 that I hear was pretty decent. But getting Blu-rays, of course, is always great. Hopefully, they do a good job. A lot of places have screwed up doing these sort of Blu-rays. So I think in later years or recent years rather, that they've been doing a pretty good job. Most localization and subtitling, translating companies. But in the past, there's been a lot of issues with bad relationships with the Japanese companies, where they've basically had to buy the Blu-rays in Japan, bring them over, then re-encode them again with their own subtitles and dub, which is a terrible way to have to do that. Other series getting a Blu-ray release. The original Mobile Suit Gundam is getting a Blu-ray release. It's funny because the animation in the original Mobile Suit Gundam is pretty rough at times. As a completely out of the blue thing that nobody ever saw coming, Legend of the Galactic Heroes is getting a U.S. release by Sentai Filmworks. So it's been considered for a long time that Legend of the Galactic Heroes was never going to get a U.S. release because, again, apocryphal. The implication has always been that no studio and no company has ever been able to pick up the rights because the asking price was absorbently high, where basically they were asking a price that no company would ever pay. And either Sentai Filmworks ponied up the money, or they finally got realistic about it, and they're finally bringing Legend of Galactic Heroes over here. Legend of Galactic Heroes is a space opera that's a very realistic, grounded sort of, not necessarily on the scientific standpoint, but more on a political standpoint. It's kind of a political commentary on on like democracies and dictatorships and the advantages and disadvantages. It's actually my favorite anime of all time, like alt-right #1 with a bullet right there at the top. It's fantastic. Until they bring it over, I recommend checking out the first 2 movies just because it's great. And also accompanying this, I don't know if this is related or just coincidental, Viz is bringing over the 10 novels that they were based on. They're bringing over the first 3, and depending on those first 3 do, then they'll bring over the rest maybe. I hope they do well because that anime is rad.
And so,
in other news, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, so these are all announcements coming from Anime Expo, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Out of Anime Expo, I believe it's been confirmed at this point that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which we're about to talk about, Part 1 and Part 2 are getting dubbed, and Part 3 is probably getting dubbed because they've already put out sort of test clips of like, here's what our dub's looking like. Part 1 and Part 2 are definitely guaranteed at this point. They've, actually are active in production. Part 3 has been, they're probably going to do all of it, and that'll be interesting. I'm thinking the stuff I was saying last time about, or a couple times ago, where there's like, oh, maybe it'll end up on Adult Swim. Apparently, that's not actually a thing yet. We'll see. I mean, it seems like it would be a good fit, but who knows?
Well, it would be nice because what else do they have good that's even showing on Adult Swim these days?
Sure.
Everyone is like, you know what? It would be really great if Toonami came back, and then Toonami came back, and then it's like, hey, we got Inuyasha, and wait, where are you going? No, stop!
Hey man, a lot of people like that Inuyasha. I am not one of them, but a lot of people like that Inuyasha.
Well, they finally finished it off at least. Like it's
Yeah.
dead. It's gone. God came back to life. It
took like 800 episodes or something or whatever.
Whatever the hell. I mean, and so much fucking filler.
Well, the summer anime season has just started. We are now in that. Not much to really talk about it as of yet. I'm kind of waiting to see what's actually good. I will mention that the new Dragon Ball series is out, and it's looking kind of interesting.
Really? Like what's making it interesting in particular?
I actually want to hear this too because
it's relevant to your interest.
I'm gonna watch it. So
even if it's good, even if it ends up being terrible, it's like I'm watching this shit. I need to...
Well, I didn't watch GT, but
good man.
It's relative. Yes, it's relevant to my interests.
So the thing about it is that it's very original Dragon Ball like in that it's very heavy on the comedy thus far, from what I understand. So not necessarily it's got a very different feel than both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z at the moment. Like it opens with like Goku farming,
What?
Like, try you wrap your head around that. I don't know, but and like the next episode preview for episode 2 has like Trunks and like like those like
Oh, it's
where they
that
have like the
kitty
vacation
train with the
kitty train, yeah, where they have like Vegeta in the back angry while he's on like a trip with the
Bulma,
family.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're setting fire to their own series, but it's looking pretty funny. So what the hell?
Hey, if it's gonna go, it might as well go in a blaze of hilarious glory.
Yeah, I mean,
This
if
is
they're just gonna
supposed
be
to
making
take
jokes on
place.
their own behalf or at their own cost or whatever, sure, go for it.
Yeah.
This is supposed to take place after Z?
Yes, this is after Z, and it's, I believe, treating the last 3 Dragon Ball Z movies as canon, which were like it's treating the special where Vegeta's brother who married a space being shows up.
Wait,
This
a
is a thing.
space beam? Like
Bean.
Bean.
Like a bean alien. It's like a little bean, but it's an alien.
oh, like the food. Okay.
Yeah, because
Yes.
Goku landed on a planet that had people look like Saiyans. Vegeta's brother, who they made up for this special, fell on a planet that had beanmen, not unrelated to Cybermen.
I guess beggars can't be choosers. And then there's the one where they fight the space cat.
Yeah, they fight Anubis essentially, and that was pretty rad. And then there's the one they just did, I believe, earlier this year, where Frieza they bring back and he's gold now. Hey man, it is what it is. And those special in those 2 movies, I haven't seen the most recent one, but they all have been really funny. Like goofy, kind of like it's like on people who know what Dragon Ball Z is, it's pretty funny and entertaining. I don't know if it's genuinely good in kind of an abstract sense of like you show it to some random person, they'll be like, yeah, this has intrinsic value. But you show it to somebody who knows Dragon Ball Z, it's like, that was pretty good. Vegeta sang a song and Piccolo got, Piccolo's Piccolo.
In general, I think it's much better for a series like Dragon Ball to have a sense of humor about itself, because whenever it tries to take itself too seriously, it just doesn't work as well. So
yeah, and they're definitely not doing that.
Yeah, so like having that sense of humor, to me, that's one of the big appeals of the Dragon Ball series originally. It had really good jokes, because I mean he was very much a humor kind of guy before he really got into.
Let's not go too far. It had a lot of jokes. I don't know if a lot of them are good jokes, because a good 50% of the jokes early on are tits. I want to see panties. Hey, look, my dick's out. I'm gonna fart on your face. That was the jokes for a while there. Like, hey, for kids, whatever.
Yeah,
that's
well,
fine.
I mean, it was made for children.
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's just sense like good jokes. I mean, and yes, this series seems to be falling on all that in of such that it's completely pretending that Dragon Ball Dragon Ball GT is a bunch of bullshit, because
well, it is.
Because this, like the movie that they did, the one where they fight the space cat, basically goes out of its way to completely invalidate everything about Dragon Ball GT and like parody it essentially.
Oh
so
God.
They know what they're doing. Like they like invert the ending to it, invert the entire plot of GT. Like, hey, we used the Dragon Balls too frivolously, and now there's Dark Dragon showing up. And then in this movie, it's like, we're just gonna for Bulma's birthday party, whoever wins this raffle gets a wish. Whatever, fuck it.
And also, Pilaf and his gang are kids now.
Yeah,
not Goku.
Yeah, they flip on the thing like we're in GT. It's like, they're a bunch old, and they make Goku young. They flip it, and they make themselves kids on accident. Now they're trying to find some way to solve that again, because they already did that. So sure. The weird thing about this Dragon Ball Super, I believe that's what it's called, there's nobody there's no like simulcast or simultaneous anything. There's no cast. There's no official release for this.
So it's entirely fan subs.
Yep.
Wow.
That is a complete mismanaged situation.
That's been a while since there's been a show like that, because it's always been picked up by at least something.
I mean, it happens occasionally, but for something as big as Dragon Ball, you'd think Funimation would have, got that locked down, seeing as how they have the rights to everything else Dragon Ball.
Well, maybe they were worried that they were going to have like a Sailor Moon Crystal situation.
Maybe. I mean, the only thing I could think is that if they were, I'm thinking it's more likely to be sourced from the Japanese side, where like, you're gonna leak it, or you're not giving us enough money. got to give us more money. I'm guessing that's what's happening.
So other than that,
one other thing is that Studio 4 Degrees C, or 4 Degrees Celsius, however you want to say it, has launched their own crowdfunding platform, sort of like Kickstarter.
but just for their films, or is it in general?
It's a general, but it only has their stuff on it right now.
Oh wow, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how widespread. I haven't taken a look at it to see what the actual conditions of it are. But their the first thing that they have on it is a anime film called Red Ash that's being tied into a Kickstarter. That's really weird, crossing multiple crowdfunding platforms like that. Tied into a game Kickstarter that Keiji Inafune, the Mega Man guy, and Concept are doing. And they're the guys that did like Mighty Number 9 and whatnot. So that's a weird thing.
Did Mighty Number 9 actually come out yet, or
not yet?
Oh.
Coming out in a couple months.
Soon.
And a lot of people are not so enthused about how that's looking to some degree, because gameplay wise it looks fine, but graphically wise it's I mean, it is what it is, but we'll see. I mean, it's kind of, they haven't done a lot to inspire people to be like immediately go, yeah, like maybe they should have waited until their previous game was already out, just so people could be, like, actually that was pretty good, rather than being, oh, that looks like crap. He looks like crap.
Like, it doesn't look like the concepts they had put forth earlier.
Absolutely not. The original concept had like art, or it was like 2-dimensional art, and this final thing is like 3D models, and the 3D models don't look so good.
Uh-oh.
So
I'll tell you, I'm just excited to play the games that I paid for 2 to 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I backed it as well, so I mean, it's interesting, but it's kind of just like it's a weird arrangement going on here with this. Hey, we made our own crowdfunding platform for Japanese stuff, but also we're tying it into this Kickstarter that's going in for American stuff. And it's kind of like this weird crossing wires situation. I'm just like, what?
It's like this weird synergy thing. Like, I mean, it would be nice to see like maybe more just film focused kind of Kickstarter thing, just to kind of like, so it might be able to facilitate the needs of like a film production more so than a Kickstarter might be. Like, that could possibly be the advantage. Other than that, it will just be like, oh, there's Indiegogo, there's GoFundMe, there's Kickstarter, there's like a million of these things that do something kind of similar to Kickstarter at this point.
I mean, and the other thing here is that they're specifically targeting at a Japanese audience, so they can't capitalize on any sort of Western interest here from the looks of it. I mean, the real route out of this, I would think, is like if Kickstarter allowed like and had some more broad multi-language support, because it's predominantly an English language platform and actually primarily a U.S. platform. And that's a really weird thing when like some of the games being kickstarted are being released, internationally. Or having, like a Japanese release, like say Bloodstained had a Kickstarter that wrapped up, a few weeks ago. That's that Castlevania-esque game. And, obviously it's being produced entirely by a Japanese studio and all the staff on it are Japanese. And yet they're flying the guys over here to do, videos, promo videos for their Kickstarter in, California with a bunch of translators translating stuff so they can have it come through. And it's kind of like, where's Japan in all this? Like, are Japanese people supporting us? Like, are they even knowing about this? Do they even know this is happening? Is their input being taken into account whatsoever? Or are these products that they're putting explicitly on Kickstarter only capable of, serving or primarily towards a Western audience, where a Western audiences are more likely to be interested in Castlevania or whatever? I don't know. Hard to say.
Well, we'll see.
Yep.
And beyond that, do you got anything?
Nope.
Well, I guess I'll just do one thing. The current season run of the Golan the Insatiable animation is going to be wrapping up soon, and I just kind of want to endorse it because I ended up watching a few more of the recent episodes, and it's gotten really good. I actually kind of like it quite a bit at the moment, so I would like to get people to check it out while it's still available. It's unfortunately being run at a time where on Sunday nights Fox isn't showing new episodes of other things, so it can't really get that splash over audience you kind of get when you have something follow like an existing popular show. So you can get the episodes if you miss them on Sundays on Hulu. So maybe that might get them some kind of form of ratings. Things like that. So it's gotten pretty good, and it also helps that the studio I used to work at, and I still enjoy their work quite a bit, is doing some of the animation on it, and especially in some of the more recent episodes, the animation has gotten a lot better. Like the in-betweening and cleanup has definitely upped its game. And that's definitely something that Og and Blick is very good at. Og and Blick being the ones who did, what is it called? The what's it? What? Dang it! Ugly Americans. Ugly Americans. That's the one that they're kind of famous for. So, other than that, I don't think there's any more news on the slate. So let's go into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This
JoJo Kimi wa Boken.
Yep.
What?
JoJo no Kimyo na Boken. Yes, it is very much its title. It has been a comic that has been running since the mid-80s, like 1986. It is still going, and it doesn't really show any signs of ever stopping. I mean, this is one of those Japanese, like, institutions. Like, this is like Doraemon to them. Like, it is like something they're all familiar with. Many of them grew up watching it and reading it. And so it finally got
they grew up reading it. They did not grow up watching it.
That's true. They're only watching it now because the other anime they did of it does not exist.
Well, that's not strictly true. They made like a 6-episode straight to video thing in the mid 90s, but it was like 6 episodes. Or no, actually, I think it was actually 12 episodes. It wasn't very good. It was just Stardust Crusaders.
I saw it. I saw it on YouTube. Yeah. And the dub's amazing.
The dub's good, but everything else is kind of eh. But they did make a OVA. Nobody grew up on that because that went straight to video. And then there was a film that, in fact, yes, they did unbirth. Like the movie came out, and then Araki was like, "Fuck that shit. That shit sucks." And then they sucked it back into their body, and then nobody ever saw it again because it sucked. Apparently,
it was erased from existence. Like I don't think it's available anywhere. So
nope.
Let's see. Oh, and of course the author Hirohiko Araki. So
yeah, and he will, like as you said, he will be making this forever because he is reversing. He's in fact Benjamin Button.
Yes.
If you find an image of him, or like over time, he actually is getting increasingly younger over time. It's really fucked up. We don't know what's going on there.
It's like the Metal Gear guy too.
Well, I don't know. Can you kind of stay constant?
Yeah. Okay. So instead of like reverse aging, he just doesn't age.
Sure. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Truly eternal.
Yep.
Oh shit! Maybe that's what his stand does.
Yeah, I mean, either that or he is in fact like the Comte de Saint Germain or something. He's a time traveling immortal, made a deal with the devil, and that's why he can make sweet ass comics. Who could say?
So it is mostly recently animated as a TV series this time by David Production, and I'm really not familiar with anything that David Production had done before this. Like it feels like
you want to know what they've done? You know what they've done before this? Nothing, essentially. They ain't
so
done
it was
shit.
Almost like an ad hoc built-up studio just for making this.
I mean, that's not strictly true. I mean, they did in-betweening for a bunch of stuff, and I think they did some crap anime that nobody cares about. I'm sure some people are getting really angry about it. Actually, I think they co-produced Level E. Level E was pretty good. But basically, they had a bunch of nothing, kind of low-level shoujo type stuff, maybe, for a while there. Or maybe some like light novel adaptations. Like they basically came into existence around 2007, 2008, and haven't done all that much beyond that. I think they were actually founded by former Gonzo members, which is kind of crazy because Gonzo sucks ass.
Well, maybe they left Gonzo because they were the one talent that was there.
I don't know. I haven't looked to see like specifically which people from Gonzo came over. Like it may have been like the worst people. Regardless, they hadn't really established like a great reputation for themselves. I mean, some of the stuff they've done is fine. None of it's been like incredible. JoJo's on the other hand has kind of been a groundswell of, hey, whoa, this David Production actually knows what they're doing, kind of.
Like, and I think that's one of the things is they've definitely captured the look of it very well. Like I think they've even
it's not 1-to-1 with the manga, but.
So,
I don't think it's 1-to-1, but they, if you look at compare a manga page and a frame, they don't look anything alike because the style evolves so much in over time in the comics. It kind of starts off looking a lot like Fist of the North Star, essentially, and then evolves into what JoJo is. And the style early on, in fact, doesn't look tremendously a lot like, the final. And that's something, David Production actually cleaned up. If you actually find the Blu-ray and DVD versions of it, they actually made it look more like the comic. They kind of redrew it because they kind of were doing it really rushed early on. And, that's, it's not exactly like the comic, but as far as adaptations go...
Like they
sure,
got
absolutely.
It's the spirit of the comic. I'm not talking about like it's not like they just took the comic pages, scanned it, and used it for poses. I mean, in the sense that like they captured the style, the feeling of how it should be. Because like with JoJo, so as we might get into, the story and the tone of JoJo is weird. I mean, and the whole thing is you could say bizarre. It. Yes, you have to embrace it. Like they have to have like everybody go all out with the acting, with the timing, the camera work, the dramatics. It all has to come together to get the right tone. Because if it really walks that thin tightrope line between, if they go too silly or too serious, it just doesn't work. Like, and so far they've nailed it really well of just getting that balance. So, like, I mean, I guess the basic story is that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure follows the generational conflict of the Joestar family. And usually the protagonist of each arc is a member of that family, and their nickname is usually JoJo. So it starts off with, it's Jonathan Joestar, right? Yeah, so it starts off with Jonathan Joestar, then it goes Joseph Joestar, who is his grandson, and then you have his... Oh, and then Jotaro is the
Joseph's
grandson again. Yeah, so it's almost like a generational skip each time so far.
That's going to change if they start animating the future parts.
Well, like I said, so far. And it originally started off in the early 20th century, right?
Yes.
So the 1800s.
Okay. So I think late 1800s in England is where it starts. And it originally feels like kind of a kind of ridiculous Victorian novel, or like how Japan would interpret a Victorian novel, because it's very much about like, oh, it's the inheritance, and it's a kind of Vanity Fair Rebecca Sharp character in the form of Dio trying to rise up from his really poor background at any through any means that they can, good or ill. And then suddenly it then turns into a supernatural fighting show thing.
Yes.
And that's
I wanted to bring up that this wasn't I didn't know anything about this show going into it. Basically, Zorak one day said, "HulkaMatt, you got to watch this." Okay. Now, I didn't really think anything of it, but I mean, the one other anime I think Zorak has shown me is one that involved dogs getting into a war with some sort of snow monster or something. He only showed me.
That was
he showed me the first episode in the last. Yeah, bear. It was like the first episode in the last episode. I think that was Road Rovers.
No. That was Ginga Eiyu Densetsu.
Oh yeah, like the
no. That's Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Why did it say that? No, Gin something Gin. It's Silver Gin.
Okay.
Whatever it was, he was showing me the first episode and last episode to show me just how insane it gets between them, and so I'm not going to question his taste or anything. I just think, okay, it's got to be good, and I see the first, I guess, 2 episodes, and I'm just thinking, I know you hate this term, but I was like, this is every anime ever. Or this is what people think when they think anime is fuck, as you say. Like, when I just saw those first 2, I was like, okay, I'll stick with it. And after that 3rd episode, it just gets insane. It's amazing.
Yeah, like, is the 3rd episode roughly where like he goes to like the street full of like the poors with knives, and then like we have REO
Speedwagon, the
show up with his bladed hat, and then it's like, you want to get medicine from the Chinamen, you have to go through Rogue Street or whatever, and here I've got my bladed hat, let's go. I think that starts in the 2nd, but
it really gets out of hand in the third episode with Dio.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean, the
And
first
then
two
from
episodes
there-
is just a sequence upon sequence of horrifying cruelty, where a dog
Oh,
is
God.
burned to death just for
Yes, Danny.
yes. So like, yeah, so it starts off as this kind of Vanity Fair style thing, almost like a critique of that kind of uh that world, that world of rich and poor and things like that, and then it turns into whatever the fuck. So you have like the high street of angry poor people with blade hats, and then suddenly you
Pretty
get
good.
they graduate college and he becomes like an archaeologist, and they discover this stone mask that turns people into vampires.
Well, okay. Well, to be fair, his father already found that because his father was a world traveling explorer, and that was the mask was there already,
Yes,
basically
yes.
in the home. And that basically Dio discovered it just early on and hadn't really thought about it. He thought, oh, that'd be an interesting thing to murder somebody with. It seems to shoot out spikes when you put blood on it. That's weird.
Oh yeah, and
I'll keep this in mind for next decade.
Yes. They get into a fight. JoJo, Jonathan, punches Dio in the face. Blood goes on it, and then spikes come out.
Yep. So
it's like, what the hell is this?
So to be fair, early on though, like we have like this setup, and it's going then like it's like kind of like, oh, it's the rival thing, and it slowly has a little bit of supernatural, and then it goes kind of more like Victorian sort of horror for a bit there, where it's kind of like, oh, Dio's a vampire. We can't. How do you kill vampires? Oh God, Dio's tearing people in half and going Ree! And
Yes.
stuff. And as vampires
before we get to that, real quick, we have to give credit to Dio's voice actor.
Yeah,
who
he does.
is perfect for that role.
I mean, yeah,
he's great. He's great. I enjoy all the voices in the show.
Yeah, I believe
Just
that's
really good stuff.
Takahito Koyasu, I believe, does Dio, and yeah, he's super popular. He does stuff everywhere. So yeah,
I thought that was Norio Wakamoto.
Am I forgetting? No, definitely not Norio Wakamoto.
Oh, okay.
No. Am I confusing my Dio voice actors? Like, there's a bunch of them. No, yeah. He does Dio. Yes, it's Takahito Koyasu.
Okay.
So yeah, Wakamoto is definitely not in JoJo's. I wish he was. I think Wakamoto actually is retired at this point, much like myself. I'm not trying to imply that I'm secretly Norio Wakamoto, but go on.
But you've never seen them in the same room at the same time.
Exactly. I may in fact be a 60, 70-year-old, former SWAT captain.
Of course. So anyway, so they mentioned that for some reason that Jonathan is studied in archaeology. So I guess he tries to study the mask for a while. But that doesn't actually go anywhere because then we get Zappelli.
Yeah, Zappelli shows up after the whole like vampire charade where Dio gets murdered and turns into a vampire, and then vampires the fuck out, and
the house burns down. The father's like, "Oh, I should have treated you better this whole time," and it's the most dramatic thing.
Yeah. JoJo's dad is like comically like pure, like, oh, I'm so good and nice. Your father was trying to steal from me, but he saved my life, kind of. So I gave him money and adopted you when he died. And even though you're a thieving prick, this is all my fault. Oh, I'm so good and rich. But yeah, then died, and then yes, Zappelli shows up, and that's where things go off the rails when Zappelli just immediately punches a frog and doesn't kill it.
Well, he punches almost through a frog using the magic of Hamon or Ripple.
Hey,
or however you want to translate it.
He punches through Jonathan, and he heals his broken arm.
Yes, he does that first, and then he demonstrates on the punching frog, which you can buy. You can buy a stuffed version of that frog and punch it yourself, and it makes like a ripple sound.
Awesome.
That sounds rad, doesn't it? So basically, Ripple is a supernatural aura type thing, and this is at the point where the first part that we're talking about here, Phantom Blood, gets really sort of Fist of the North Star.
Yes, very much so.
Fist of the North Star with vampires and punch. The thing they say with the Ripple is that it's kind of like a wave. It's a wave, kind of like sunlight, and it's a life force, and vampires can't deal with that, kind of like they can't deal with The sun. So essentially, they're punching the sun into vampires. That is literally how this is going down. Let's not pretend that it isn't, because that's what's happening.
That's what's happening. Yep, you're absolutely right.
Yep, and then basically, I mean, it's really interesting, but essentially the next 8 or so episodes are just that. It's a build-up, like, it's not, like, episodic at all, but it's just a build-up to the final showdown with Dio in his Dracula castle that he's made in this little hamlet. And the actual events of it are fun, but they're really inconsequential looking about it in hindsight.
Well, yeah, because it's just a sequence of events. Like, he ends up fighting these two warriors from, like, the 13th century Dark Ages.
Yeah, because apparently he can vampire those back.
He can vampire those back, and one of them is like, "You are so honorable. I have to give you this sword of pluck."
Yeah, and also, like, I think, is Zapili dead already at this point? Yeah, he does, because they go into that chamber that
he dies in the second, to the second one.
Yeah, because he dies when they go in that chamber where with the spikes and stuff, where it's like, oh, you gotta anybody that goes in the chamber has to die, and that's a really fun battle right there, just because it's like, like we're tied to this chain, and it's all this chain stuff, and then Zapili, I think, dies in there, or dies helping him in there or something.
Sometime in there, and then there is the other companions, one of which dies like, "Oh no, not person I just met, no!"
Yeah, because a bunch of, like, Zapili's, like, former masters show up from, I don't know, like, Central Asia, like, what up, we're here to help you to fight, Dio, because we also hate vampires, what up? And then they basically, one gets immediately owned, a couple help out, and then Dio shoots breath lasers out of his eyes and turns to ice. He has a lot of moves that he forgets how to do in the future.
Yeah, there's just a lot of random bullshit that happens, but again, that is part of the fun, is because it just gets it stacks on the ridiculousness, but at the same time it knows that this shit is ridiculous and doesn't spend time trying to justify it, nor does it spend any time winking at the audience.
No, I think that's
with it.
I disagree. It spends a lot of time trying to justify it. It's just that their justifications are goofy and they know it. That I think Araki knows. Like, they say, like, oh, vampires, like his cold blood. He is super moving this cold blood through his body at a high speed, which allows him to, steal the temperature from the air, freezing things around him. This will be a good defense against Jonathan because Jonathan's flesh can't handle it. And if his flesh freezes, he cannot transfer the ripple into Dio.
Oh, yeah, because it stops the blood flow and shit like that. I can't.
Exactly. And they overly explain everything. Like, this is something that happens to comical effect in part 2 when we have the ultimate life form be created, and they have showing, like, everything about ultimate life forms, like no need for sex, he's perfection, that sort of thing. That they definitely go out of their way to explain it. That's Araki's shtick, is that he has reasons for it. It's just that it's also comically goofy at the same time.
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't help that all the enemies and all the main characters seem to be named after bands.
We did not touch on that. Yeah. Everything is a band reference.
Like, Speedwagon is...
It's literally REO's Speedwagon.
Yes. Richard Speedwagon or something, and there's, like, Doobie and... Dire and Straits.
The second
Cars, Wham. It's just...
The villains of the second part are Santana, Cars, Wham, and AC/DC.
Yep.
Yes.
It's like it's funny when they break it over, like, on Crunchyroll, and they try to cover that up, like, especially in, like, part 3.
They're clearly saying
he's like, "Damn you, cars!" And in the text, it's
it's cars
"Damn
with
you,
a K.
vehicles!"
No. With Cars, they still kept it as Cars. They spell it differently.
I know, but I mean,
with AC/DC, they spell it as ECDC.
Yeah,
it's like,
I think the big one, the biggest one is
Mondada,
Oingo and Boingo,
Dada on Dada or something like that.
Yeah,
Zenyatta. Or
I mean, they go for, like, they change the references into more subtle references. Is what essentially they don't remove the reference; they just try to make it more subtle.
But the thing is you can hear them saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. And that's going to be really interesting going forward, because every stand going on is also a band name
or a song name. or
exactly,
something
and
like
it's
that. Like it's
it's gonna be interesting in part 4 because there's
Aura.
there's some stuff named after like Prince stuff. Like, what are they gonna do there?
But it is really funny seeing them fighting these various music figures and cursing their names constantly.
Curse you, AC/DC. Yeah. Yep. And, like, the main villain of the next part is in fact Car, and of course Dio is also a bit. It's Dio.
Yeah.
That's where they're going with
Yes.
that. Which is a result of a lot of really neat, fun jokes of people referencing Dio songs, referring to it. But yes, and the interesting thing about part 1 with the animation is that they clearly didn't have a lot of budget going in. I talked about already the fact that they reanimated a lot of stuff in part 1.
Yes.
And
just
a lot of
because
TV shows do that for their DVD releases.
Sure.
Some
And
have to do it more than others, but yes.
that usually is like, kind of driven by schedule issues more than anything.
Yeah.
And there were a fair number of schedule issues with, the first couple seasons of JoJo. But they basically, their take on it is that they didn't have enough budget to really go all out in a lot of ways that they wanted to. So they kind of made up with it by going really, really, really hard on the style.
Yes.
Where they started using a lot of like effects and like sort of plugins and stuff, and like doing weird colors to make it look a lot like how how Araki paints his comics when he paints them in color as well. He does things in this sort of style where it's like fucking crazy neon. Just like what is going on visually
look
here?
Like what the model of the character is supposed to be in terms of the colors. Like he'll just go, yeah, his hair's green now. Like he'll just do that.
And just like a few frames too. Yeah, and it's like characters will change colors and stuff. Like their outfits will change colors. Part 3 has a fun instant that I'm just gonna mention now, where like an outfit's like everybody's outfit at one point just changes to like the colors of the outfits from the OVA as a reference to the OVA because the scene that's from was the best scene in the OVA. So they're calling back to that by changing everybody's colors to be like that scene in the OVA. And that's a really funny reference to be making.
The whole thing has like this understanding of its own history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect way to approach this. Like they have like, you get the feeling that they have a lot of respect for the source material just in general. Like they really understand what they're doing. They're not doing this entirely because of, hey, this light novel's popular, whatever. I mean, guys like things with girls with their panties showing.
These 16-year-old girls that look like they're 8. Yeah. Well, but again, like I think it helps that this is JoJo, as in it's fucking JoJo. It is an institution. You do not fuck this up and leave with your reputation intact. And I think they had to be aware of that. I mean, yes, I do think they also happen to respect it, but I mean, yeah, if you fuck up JoJo, you get undone. Araki has that power. He can declare something to no longer exist, and it will disappear from human memory.
Yeah, like the interesting thing about like to really emphasize how big like the cultural spread of this thing is, if you go on YouTube, you can find videos of them like doing like dancing exercises in the morning, and the exercises are all JoJo poses.
Yeah,
and they're all just saying JoJo catchphrases.
Poses are very famous. Like people who are really into it can recognize which character is being referenced by just how they've been posed.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I loved in the first season is like, again, like, when they didn't do the action animation, yeah, they'll animate that. But when they had them just speaking, they gave them that very JoJo style pose. Like it's almost ballet-like in a weird, I mean, I don't even know how to explain what the poses look like because they're so ornate. They're kind of thing like when you're a kid and you want to just come up with like, this is what a cool fighting pose would look like, and it's like it's
I have a word for them. I have a perfect word for them. They are fabulous.
That is actually the best word.
I mean, in every connotation of it, that is what they are. Like, not not to say like, oh, they're a fet or anything. No, they are fabulous poses.
Sometimes they are a little bit of fet, but they're like, that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
It just they happen to be like they're both badass and a fet at the same time. Like they meld the two. Like you get again, like it's kind of like ballet is like you can display like grace but also power with the right posing. Like that's a thing in actual ballet. Like everything about it is just choreographed in that way.
I mean, part 2 really goes hard on that stuff where you have the Pillarmen show up who are, like literally just nude and like, just giant, like, they are just in, jock straps essentially the entire time, and that's it. Like they're a
For the
dude
longest time, I
over
actually
each
did
other.
think that Araki was gay. Like,
No, he's got a wife and kids.
I know that, I know, but what I'm saying is, like, when I looked, even his later stuff, when the characters are no longer these huge buff men, the clothing that he dresses them in, and the lipstick and the pierce, I was like,
oh yeah,
is Araki gay and or a drag queen? Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's cool. It's just, it's something you normally see in certain sects of gay culture. Like it's almost like he's very much in tune with that. Like in this kind of this couture type of thing. But I mean, but he's not. He's such a even into this century, he's still like the 1980s. Something
he's just
about
really
his
comfortable. Well, I don't know actually, because going forward, like he gets real, like he clearly follows modern fashion. It's just that the modern fashion he follows is definitely the auteur. Like he is literally reading like weird fashion magazines. He does lots of tie-ins with like Parisian, like fashion things. Where
like the couture
standalone
art style stuff. Like it's not
like
stuff that's
I
meant for
actually
public
own like
at-wear type of thing.
Yeah, like I actually own like the hardcover that he did with what is the big Paris art museum that I'm blanking on it right now.
The Louvre?
Yeah, like he did a tie-in like manga with the Louvre where
oh yeah, one of the characters from part 4.
Yeah, where one of the part 4, yeah, Rohan Kishibe shows up there, and they have like he does a lot of that sort of stuff. Like there's like stuff like handbags and stuff. Like he is in the vogue. He's just in the very auteur vogue of art style going forward.
Avant-garde.
And early on, yes,
it's
exactly.
the avant-garde couture type of thing. Like none of what these characters wear is ready to wear type of things. Like these are the ones that, like, if someone says like, "Huh, look at fashion," and they'll show you a picture of something weird, it's like, well, the whole point is it's supposed to look really weird and interesting. Like it's an art piece. Like that's what these are. They're not meant to be worn by human beings. But and not only are they being worn by human beings in this, he's making them fight in them.
Yep.
Well, if you're going to take over the world, you might as well look good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or hey, if you're protecting the world, you got to look fabulous. So,
yes.
Again, everything about it is just like not only are the situations and the powers like just over the top, the visuals and the visual style of the characters is also over the top. Like again, like it just ramps it up to maximum, and having that color use that Zorak was talking about earlier is just another aspect of that, and it all ties together.
To be fair, though, with part 3, which is kind of its own standalone thing, because the first 2 parts were produced as a single unit, and the third part was produced like a year or so later.
Yeah.
They had a higher budget, clearly, for part 3, the 2 seasons of part 3 of Stardust Crusaders. They don't go quite as hard in the color stuff, but they still maintain all the poses from the comics. They still maintain all the weird character designs. They go a little less hard on hey, we need to color over everything, and the pace is somewhat less frantic because the comic was somewhat less frantic. It was a bit more slow and kind of measured. Well, measured.
Well, it's also, I think, in general, like the first 2 parts feel like a separate thing from the rest of the series eventually, because as the Hamon gets replaced with personas, right? That's what they...
No, Stans had it first. Persona gonna get fucking sued by Rocky.
Yeah, so one of the big jokes not in the series but outside of it is that the Persona series, the very popular franchise from Atlas, is very much influenced by JoJo. I mean, Persona 4 and Part 4 even having a similar kind of premise in terms of the serial killer thing and a bunch of teenagers in their small town trying to solve it. Like,
I mean, JoJo is
point.
Incredibly influential in general. Like,
just tons of things.
There's comics that exist entirely on the basis of like, oh, this character just quotes JoJo, like that sort of thing, or video games, like for example, like Castlevania has a lot of JoJo references in it throughout. There's a boss in Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow that's literally just quoting Dio lines in freezing time.
The whole Chunibyo thing is usually people who act out those JoJo poses in real life. Like
Sure.
I mean, even the Persona games have JoJo references in them. Like, I think in one of the more recent games, they had the characters all doing the JoJo poses as their introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole, it's very much, it's again, it's such an influential series. Like it is something that's like hammered into the base unconscious of everybody who grew up in Japan from the 80s onward.
And the weird thing is, like, it's not like Doraemon where it's like, oh, it's something we know from kids. It's something just like, oh, everybody likes JoJo. It's kind of like One Piece is to some degree, except that JoJo is a more mature, sort of more kind of. It's so weird. Everybody likes JoJo.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird because I didn't know this thing existed until Zorak showed me the first episode, and I was at a Barnes and Nobles of all things with a friend. We saw the manga section. I was like, "What if they have JoJo?" And he was like, "JoJo, the video game?"
Yeah,
like,
that's
what?
the weird thing. Yeah. That's the weird thing.
A lot
like,
of people
most
know
people
it from the fighting games.
Yeah, because there was like one fighting game that they brought in the '90s that was a Part 3 fighting game, and that's what people knew about it over here for the longest time. And they actually brought over the Part 3 manga by itself over here, as well as the OVA. Like that was just kind of how it happened, in the early '90s, where it timed up that way, and nothing else was brought over here for the longest time, and just people started translating the manga, and we'll get to it a little later, but like the manga translations got kind of bad, but it's
kind
just,
of famously.
Well, actually, we won't be talking about it. We'll be talking about whenever we talk about the Part 4 anime, but yes, famously bad, but there's even a lot of references to that where like fan subs that are deliberately bad to make fun of that.
They were if you do want to look those up, they're called the Duwang version.
Ah, what a beautiful Duwang.
Yep, and you can actually get the anime dubbed in that style.
Yep, and it's kind of, it loses its humor after like about an episode. But
I mean, if you're
if you're in on the joke,
yeah.
But yeah, anyways, so part 1, we're talking about Dio. He has a fight with Dio. Dio gets his head chopped off and falls off a cliff. It's clearly dead, never going to come back. Way to go, Jonathan! Thank God you got that sword.
I just think we should quickly point out real quick that obviously this stone mask we've been talking about, the one with the spikes, Dio puts it on his head and it turns him into the vampire.
Well, and not before testing it on like a hobo.
That's right.
Yes.
And that hobo freaks out. And then he discovers, like, wait, I've got a great idea. I too can become a crazy hobo. I mean,
Well, I mean, he noticed that the guy
was
able to survive, like, being shot and a bunch of other shit. Well, before he was eventually killed by sunlight, but, yeah,
Yep.
Yeah. You win some, you lose some.
And then with, like you said, he brought back a bunch of knights. He turned Jack the Ripper into a vampire. That's what happened to him, apparently. There's a bunch of random stuff where he turns men into, like, weird monster. He does the monster mash, essentially,
like thralls, kind of.
Yep. Yeah. And eats a bunch of ladies. Eats like some vampire stuff, basically. And eventually gets his head chopped off, and then turns out, hey, Jonathan and his girlfriend, who we've not touched on because she doesn't matter that much, but she is sort of relevant. Basically, he and his girlfriend, who Dio was fucking with when they were kids, basically, not literally in that sense, but
yes, not literally,
but messing with.
Asshole.
Basically, they get married and they said, "Oh, we're gonna go on our honeymoon to America. We're getting on the steamboat. Goodbye. Hey, someone's loading up this coffin in here. That ain't suspicious at all. Whatever." And
good
then
thing
it turns
we
out...
made sure to recover his body to verify that he was dead. Wait, no, I thought you were supposed to do that. Oh, God damn it.
Well, his body was there. His head was not, as it turns out, because his head is now in a jar being carried by a horrible stereotype of a Chinese man.
Japan.
It's true.
I think the guy's actually called like Wang
mustache.
Chun tonight.
Yes. Yes.
So Wang Chun basically has like Dio's head, and Dio's like, well, I'm ahead now. Jonathan, I want your body. I want your body right now.
I want it in me. I mean, I want my head on your... No. God damn it. I can't come up with a good way of saying this.
And so he shoots out his lasers to cut off Jonathan's head. Jonathan manages to grab his head as the boat explodes because the boil is exploding. And then his wife, who is pregnant because honeymoon,
also saves a baby, too.
A random baby, which is relevant.
The only other survivors are her and the baby she saves.
Let's pause this for a second and point out that there's a critical issue here. she survives by getting in Dio's coffin.
Yes.
Dio later survives by being in his coffin.
I know.
So this is one of the big paradoxes of, was there a second coffin? Was he in that coffin and she was on top of him, but he was in under a second thing? Where was there a second coffin?
Yes, there was. It was behind the grassy knoll.
There was a second coffin behind the coffin you weren't seeing, or she found an unrelated coffin that just happened to be there.
Well, considering when this takes place, people died just going to the store, so maybe that ship just happened to have a lot of coffins.
It's possible. I think that was explicitly
it's
Dio's
one of those
coffin,
things you just have
whatever.
to, because like, oh, did you remember to pack your luggage and your coffin in case you, God be willing, die on your trip over to the next town over, as we always do.
Sure. I mean, but yeah, it was just a little. But anyways, then we jump over 30, 50, 50 years.
Because we have World War I, and then the next one takes place
I think it's in
around
the 20s.
World War II.
Because
that's right. Jonathan's son is a World War I pilot who further has a son, Joseph, who is the protagonist of part 2. And he's Joseph is my favorite because he's very much a trickster figure, and he is almost kind of in on the ridiculousness, and he uses that to his advantage.
I mean, part 2 does open up with that great moment of, okay, well, what basically REO Speedwagon, who we all love, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody loves REO
useless
Speedwagon
for part 1, but he's so much fun because he's the narrator. He is basically the narrator of the first one. Like, oh my god, what is happening?
Yes.
Even Speedwagon did not see this coming.
Yes.
Yes. It kind of reminds me of Krillin, except he's way better.
Yeah.
But he's always on the sidelines going, oh my god, what's happening? Oh no.
He's Krillin with a hat.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And so basically Speedwagon's busy in Mexico doing stuff to follow up on, he was trying to follow up on the stone mask thing to see where the hell that came from. And he accidentally finds a giant statue covered in stone mask, as well as a stone man. And then he brought in with him another Ripple user, and something happens at that expedition, and everybody dies. And then, hey, Joseph is in New York City with his grandma he flew over to meet his grandma from England. That was the pastiche or whatever, or rather the setup.
It's weird. I can't remember if Joseph is American or if he's British.
I'm pretty sure he's British.
I know he's British.
I know he's from England.
Because he's fighting because he gets pissed off at the racist cops and punches them.
Right, and he uses bottle caps.
Yep.
Yeah.
So basically, this whole thing with Joseph is that he knows how to use the Ripple, but he never was trained in it.
Yeah.
He just basically knows how to do it naturally, just as he was born into it, essentially, even though they actually established later that his father had no idea, in fact, how to do it, this pilot father, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing is, everybody in the JoJo family is born with a star birthmark.
Yep, that's important. This will be relevant later.
Yeah.
So basically, Joseph gets into fights some cops, and this weird guy shows up. Immediately, after hearing that Speedwagon is dead, who has basically raised him as, his grandfather/father. And basically this guy shows up and he's a weirdo. He immediately determines that 1, he's a vampire. 2, he's the former guy from part 1 named Straits. And then part 3 has Tommy guns and immediately blows him to fucking pieces.
Yep.
Yes.
Just pulls him out of his jacket. He stole some Tommy guns from some gangsters and just fucking levels him in a bar. And even this vampire, this guy oh, what the fuck? And he's just fucking blown to shreds. And that really sets the tone for part 2 in general.
Yeah. Well, again, everything that he comes up with is a great trick. He gets people to kind of pull themselves into the noose and just hangs them, and then he makes them realize what they did just before they die.
And he likes doing the thing where he finishes everybody's sentences, or no, he starts everybody's sentences.
He tells everybody, this is what you're going to say next. And he says it, and then the person then just repeats it, and they're like, oh, fuck.
Yes.
He's in my head. Get out of there, Charles. But yeah, they basically how it goes, and then he manages to ripple this vampire guy to death, And it's like, actually, your grandpa's probably alive, but Nazis got him. There's Nazis in Germany.
Nazis.
Or Nazis in Mexico.
Yes. Nazis. And everyone, one of them's in the intro. It's cool.
For the longest time, I thought he was Guile from Street Fighter because he looks
that's where Guile's
exactly
design came from.
Yeah.
That's where Guile's design came from.
Really?
That's where Guile's design came from. Yeah.
But isn't Guile
American? I know.
Yeah, he's an American soldier instead. But yes, that's where Guile's design came from with like the hair. And there's also I believe a King of Fighters character that's also got that hair or a similar hair.
Yeah.
And that's like I said, we've all said JoJo really influential. So Joseph flies down to Mexico, dresses up as a lady to sneak into a Nazi compound with some tequila.
Yes. After he look the part at all.
Well, yeah, because he's this buff-ass, ripped guy in a dress with tequila.
Oh, and the voice actor for Joseph is amazing.
Yes.
I love this voice actor.
Yep. Yeah, and so he's a complete fucking, he's just palling around, basically. And then these Nazis are basically experimenting on this Pillar Man to try to wake him up, and they basically just pump blood on him from captured Mexican women. And basically, just like, hey, this Pillar Man wakes up, and he's like this barely, they're like, he doesn't seem to be sentient. What's his deal? We don't know. We have him in this locked chamber. He can't get through. Hey, where'd he go? I don't know. I blinked. And he comes through the vents and just tears the guy in half.
Oh, yes. Let's name him Santana.
Yes, like, he's the great, like the morning sun, Santana. It's like, what? Or I forget what the actual inspiration, but they're like, like the river or something, and they come up with this sort of like justification, like, yes, Santana. And then they find him, and then the Joseph shows up in like a Nazi outfit, like, I was here. And then turns out Santana can talk, and Santana's a kind of an idiot. Oh, it turns out Speedwagon's alive, and then Santana gets killed with Sun in a really cool fight, but Santana isn't very interesting, so let's not talk about it.
Yeah, because...
Oh, yeah, and I just wanted to point out, because you just mentioned a cool little fight, because the only, this is basically like an action anime, but not, well, it is and it isn't, but, I'm used to seeing, anime fights that go, 20 episodes. These fights get resolved super quick.
Usually in
1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah, 2 episodes, maybe 3 at most.
Yep.
And there's a lot of dudes. It's
and a lot of these,
I don't know.
And a lot of the fights aren't strictly fights like I punch you. Oh, you punched me real good. Yeah, they're puzzle fights.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're puzzle. That's what I mean by it's action, but not really. There's at least one fight in this series where a punch is not even thrown.
Yep, and part 2 and part 1 are the fightiest of them. Part 1 especially is really fighty.
Yeah.
And over time, it gets increasingly less fighty. I mean, there still are instances of, hey, I'm gonna punch you if I get in range, but there's always going forward. There's always a puzzle element to it, and there's definitely a puzzle element here where they're like, oh, we need to get Santana out into the sunshine so he dies. We got to find some way of doing that. Oh, he's going for the well. Oh, Santana, you forgot the light would be reflecting through the well too. The light's reflecting off the well. You're getting double hit here.
Oh yeah, it was wasn't it reflection off of the water or something like that?
Yeah, exactly, because it was high. He managed to delay them to high noon or whatever.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. It's like I was thinking on 3 levels ahead of you.
3-dimensional chess.
Exactly.
Yeah. And again, that's why I really like Joseph. It's as opposed to the protagonist in Arc 3, Joseph is a little bit more upfront with it, and he's much more interesting, I think, because of it.
I mean, he's kind of a lot more upbeat.
He's very bombastic, and that's what kind of makes him...
bombastic's a perfect word.
Again,
for him.
He's very much very much a trickster figure, and he wears that on his sleeve, and that makes him very fun.
Speaking of JoJo's, nobody really liked Jonathan, right?
No.
He was okay. He was okay.
He was blandly. He was just he was too good. He was JoJo Jesus.
Yep.
That's it.
His dad was, but
both of them.
I was extremely upset at the end of part 1, and then part 2 happened, and I was like, "Holy!"
They're like, "All right, I'm in again." Whatever. But yeah, Jonathan was just so milk toasty. Though I want to point out, so there's a key moment during the fight with Santana where it opens up to basically there's a musical thing that it's like opens up with Loner of an Only Heart owner of a lonely heart. Like da 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 da. So here's an interesting thing about the first two parts about JoJo is that they have a great soundtracks that are very different, but they're used terribly.
Kind of, yeah.
like they basically like I think actually like the music, like the person who composed it actually like freaked out, like melted down at the director for actually like applying it badly. Like, I made this awesome soundtrack and you're using it terribly. You're just using the same music every episode type stuff. Like,
yeah.
It's like there's some good instances where it's used well, but overall it's not the perfect work. It's fine. It's just not the best part of it. Like, the soundtrack is great just on its own.
I will say I really love how they transition into the credits music a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah. We have not talked about the fact that the ending song is Roundabout by Yes. Which is fantastic.
Well, I think the entire series, all the songs they use for the ending and the intro, I think they're fabulous.
I really like the opening songs.
I really loved. That's my favorite opening one. Yeah.
I grew to like all of them, but I kind of think 4 has turned into my favorite now, but or not 4, but part 3, part 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The second, I don't know. The second one wasn't my favorite. I mean, it was fine. I really liked the animation and stuff. Like, I liked some of the weird, funny foreshadowing in it and stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my favorite song. Like, I still liked the first one just because of how over the top it was.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And they end up using it at the end of part 2 when appropriate.
Yeah.
So they're not idiots about the music, but they're not doing the full justice that they could with the music that was handed to them. And part 3 was not astoundingly well handled in terms of the music applied to the episodes. Like, there are certain directors that are very good at intermixing, how well they have this music, and they're going to use it perfectly. It's not that, but it does the job, and it's still very good and passable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so they go to Europe or Joseph goes to Europe to train and learn more about it.
I thought you said Egypt for a second. I was like, wait,
he goes to Rome, where more of these stone pillar men have been found, and he meets the I guess is it the grandson?
Caesar.
Yeah, the grandson of Will Zappelli, Caesar Zappelli.
Oh, I love you, Caesar.
Yes.
And the rivalry between the two ends up forming a good amount of the humor, at least for, I'd say, like the middle part of the series. Because then they also meet, I think, one of my other favorite characters, Lisa.
Yep.
Who's a really great character. Because and essentially what it is that Joseph really needs to learn how to use the ripple or hormone correctly, because he's just been kind of winging it so far. So they go through some really insane kind of training things where they have to climb a greasy pole to the top, but it's like a inverse cone shape, so that way, like, how are you supposed to be able to get to the top?
Well, to be fair, this is actually after that actually occurs after they find the Pillarmen.
Yeah.
Yes, because the Pillarmen, that's the whole reason they're really training after a while.
Yeah, because all the wedding ring stuff.
Yeah.
Again, some of the language is really interesting.
These very big muscular men giving Joseph wedding rings, which are actually like time bombs with poison in them, stuck to various organs inside of him, like his heart or his throat. And oh boy.
Yeah, so basically they go down there and basically these Nazis, being idiot Nazis as they are, immediately accidentally wake up these pillar men, and their awakening sequence is still like one of my favorite moments overall in JoJo. I really like how they accompanied the music in it, just in the anime.
Yeah.
Just them just bursting out the wall after like tearing this guy in half, just covered in like gems to try to trick people to try to come over to them so they would have blood when they want to wake up.
Yep.
And basically just dramatically posing, awaken my master, just like, it's so good and it's so fucking fabulous. I love it. And basically this whole thing that these pillar men were just like, the backstory such as these pillar men made the vampire mask because they were this ancient society that just wanted to find some way to get like their civilization or like their race of men were like affected by the sun and couldn't like learn the ripple and stuff. And basically the head of these surviving ones decided that he wanted to, achieve perfection by finding a certain stone that, when applied to the mask, would allow him to become a like vampire stone man and actually be able to stand out in the sun.
Yeah.
And then basically that's the whole thing, is that they want this red stone of Asia, this giant gemstone that can do ripple shenanigans. And basically that's essentially the plot. They do the training, and these pillar men are great. I love all their personalities.
And let's go through the names. You have Wham, AC/DC,
Whamu.
and Cars.
Yep, Wham's my favorite, I think. Wham's everybody's favorite. Because he
was the most then also wasn't he the kind of the most noble of them, because he actually
Cars was the one who was the big boss and was ultimately a big asshole. He was a huge fucking asshole. AC/DC was fun because AC/DC had the thing where he lost his arm and then started crying. That bit was amazing, where he's like, it's comical, just like, and a perfect example, just like all amazingly, just like they mix common and like drama in just like weird ways. Like, it's fantastic. Like, this is the JoJo's ass thing impossible. And then the thing with Wham is like, Wham is like both really noble, but he also just like saying his Wamu when he poses and stuff.
Yes, he's the one that has the wind-based thing, right?
Yep. He's wind-based. AC/DC has the like tentacle shit, or he splits his body or something, or flames.
I honestly don't remember.
I can't remember. He's one of those things. He splits his body out or something. But anyways, he splits it to parts or something. Yeah, that's it. Because remember, he attaches like his heart or something with the stone, or mails his heart.
Oh yeah,
he does something weird like that. But then in Cars has blades and like wind stuff. And then ultimately, after all these a bunch of fights, and then it turns out, Zapili Jr. gets moidalized.
Junior.
He gets moided. Yeah, he
That's like,
and his thing is he uses like bubbles as his thing, and a bloody bubble containing the antidote ring is the thing that
banana.
And while Wama was like, okay, Joseph was supposed to be the one that kills me, but you know what? You fought well, so I'll just let it go.
I just want,
even though I just crushed you to death with a stone slab, so you are literally just paste. That's the other thing. This series, when characters die, they don't always get the honorable, drawn-out death that you usually get in these types of series, where it's like, tell my wife, I love her.
No, Caesar was just
they
dead.
just like, some of them just get disintegrated instantly. Like, major characters will just die completely and unceremoniously.
In part 3, it was really funny when that happens later to a character in part 3.
Funny.
HulkaMatt was being like, no, that couldn't have been real. Like, he could just vaporize basically off screen, right? Like, that couldn't be real. And then the like so and so died, and he's like, no, god damn it, no.
No, to be fair, his hands were left over.
Well, it could have been some other that could have been a work of an enemy stand.
I just wanted to say, because you just like kind of said Caesar gets murdered, but that's like legitimately probably, I guess the scene where he's discovered is probably like one of my favorite scenes in the entire series, just because like the music that plays at that point when they find him, and it's just a really powerful scene.
Well, because
you mean when they find his blood,
he wears it.
Yes,
that's all they find is his blood.
Yeah, but I like the scene a lot.
Yeah,
okay?
no, sure.
It's really emotional.
Yeah, and I mean, we're also skipping over this other stuff. So hey, just real quick to say, folks, if you aren't watching this stuff, you should watch this. Even if we're talking about it, we ain't really spoiling shit. None of this stuff matters.
Well, we're definitely spoiling shit, but we're not.
We're not spoiling the actual value of it.
You have to watch it to appreciate it. Like, it's not about the end; it's how they get there, and
it's about the journey and all the execution. Like, I could say like how part 4 ends, and it wouldn't matter whatsoever. I'm just saying, like, it would not matter at all in terms of anyone's enjoyment if you're not a crazy person.
Yeah.
I'm a crazy person. So
and again, nothing about this series is really about doing like, oh, it's the big twist, you won't see it coming. It's not really about that.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun to see them discover
the individual
stands,
fights
but
have that a little bit where they come up with solutions, but overall there's no sudden big gigantic plot twist. Like, in general, it doesn't rely on that. It's very episodic in that regard. So it's just really interesting to see how they come up with solutions to these very strange situations.
Yep. And then it turns out that Lisa, their mentor, is in fact Joseph's mother.
Mommy.
They go have he goes has an awesome chariot fight with Wham on vampire horses, and it's great.
Yes.
That entire fight sequence is fantastic. Oh,
It
it's
is.
It's one
so
of his
good.
better tricks too, because I mean, holy shit.
Yeah, and then they have the fight with Cars. Cars accidentally becomes the ultimate life form, and they have the
Because
hilarious
he
shit
gets
about
the
that.
he gets the stone that everyone's like, don't let him get the stone, and
Oh man, okay, can we pause and talk about the awesome squirrel sequence?
Oh god. All the Nazis are there.
Yeah, it's like, oh my hand, oh shit, fuck, we fucked up so bad. We didn't talk about all the Stroheim shit.
right.
Well, Stroheim's everyone's favorite Nazi.
Yeah, it's Stroheim. Stroheim shows up and he's a cyborg.
He's a mecha Nazi.
Yeah. Okay, first on he gets basically torn to pieces and part in the first part of this of second part, and then he shows up later and now he's a fucking cyborg thanks to Nazi technology with a solar laser in his chest so he can shoot people with sunshine. This is their take of it, and it's they're deliberately not trying to make you root for the Nazis because it's the kind of though they're Nazis
at the
suck.
same time.
They have
at the same time though.
Humanity
They
has
basically
a common
make them the good
enemy
guy
in this case.
Yep, it's he's the enemy of all mankind, and they basically actually at the end just say Stroheim dies in World War II because fuck Nazis.
Yeah. Well,
So,
he gets practically destroyed anyway, multiple times.
Yeah, well, he gets rebuilt though. He's a cyborg.
Well,
but basically, yeah. So they have this wonderful sequence where Cars is the ultimate life form now because he becomes ultimate vampire. He can change his body anything, so he changes his hand into a squirrel. And the squirrel finds another squirrel, and then immediately eats that other squirrel, and then just goes flying, tearing Nazis in half and shit. This shit sounds mental, but it happened, and it's
turns
great.
into the rabbit from that Monty Python movie, the
Exactly.
Holy Grail. It's
and
that's a great description, actually.
And then we have this. It's not a great sequence of how they It's fun how it resolves, where it's basically Joseph goes. I think he gets a bit. Well, Joseph's big strategy at all times is to run away.
Yes.
And he manages to run away and get Cars' attention. Cars turns into he ends up getting a plane. Cars goes flying because now he can turn into a bird and shit. And then manages to find an active volcano, cause the volcano to erupt, and then not Cars into space, where he freezes up and lives forever now as a horrible thing in space.
Yeah, it's actually probably one of the more horrifying deaths because they describe it as
because he's there forever.
As he floats alone in space, his consciousness is still awake, but it gets to the point where he can't think anymore at all.
Yeah, the narrator basically says Cars stops thinking.
Well, because eventually, basically, after millions of years, he just goes insane and basically loses
his entire. Yeah, it's
he's begging for death, but it never comes.
It's one of the more brutal ones, and you know what? They actually don't have him come back.
I'm gonna give you a little spoiler for part 4. The protagonist may do that to someone else in part 4, and it is rad. That is coming up. Part 4 is so good. I can't wait for it to be animated. Anyways, go on. So at this point, basically, everybody's like, oh, Joseph died. Then Joseph shows up, and now he's got a robot hand. It's great.
And also a wife.
Yep. And he went and got married.
Didn't tell everyone that he was alive.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, they're having the funeral.
Susie Q.
Yep, Susie Q.
Yes, that's her name. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's Susie Q.
Yep. Yeah, and they meet up with everybody, including Speedwagon, Lisa, and his grandma, and also we didn't talk about
a puddle of blood, for Caesar.
Oh yeah. Well, we forgot. We never talked about him because he doesn't really matter that much. But there's also Smokey, who shows up a couple times.
Oh, Smokey.
Yeah, he's just there. I mean, he he was there to be what Speedwagon was in the first arc.
Exactly.
Yes.
And also for them to make some commentary about racism in New York City in the 1930s.
Yeah.
They quit being racist. Joseph punches some guys, and then later becomes the first mayor in Alabama or something.
Is there a kid in part 4 also that just shows up? Because there's a kid in every part so far. There's one in part 1. There's Smokey in part 2.
There's that little girl in part 3.
I will say, in fact, there is a kid in part 4. He becomes pretty rad though.
Yeah.
Okay, but all right.
He does Speedwagon early on. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there. Someone immediately fills that role, and it is in fact basically the narrator. Yes.
Yeah.
Because this is the last series where we see Speedwagon, but not his foundation.
Yeah, because
so
basically
Speedwagon
he
lives on
is
in
a
this
oil baron.
multinational corporation. Well, not a corporation, but it's like, I don't know.
It's a foundation, they say.
It's like it's basically that world's equivalent of like the Clinton Global Initiative or something like that.
Well, it's kind of like
named
after
a
like the
really
Bill Gates
shitty
Foundation.
band.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's basically like Bill Gates like philanthropy thing, except like it just basically exists to just fund the Joe.
Yeah,
it just exists to enable the Joe stars to just call in stuff at random.
Yeah,
just throw money around, which is used to comical effect a lot of times, and to set up some
especially
stuff.
part 3. Like it's
so there's a lot of funny shit in part 3.
Ends with Joseph in 1987 now, so it jumps quite a few years, where he
jumps like 40 plus years.
He really hates Japanese people because his daughter married one or something.
Exactly. He's just pissed off that now his daughter lives in Japan.
He's like,
she's not all around.
Stupid Japanese people, but I love these Walkmans. It's like,
yeah.
By the way, it's the 80s.
Guy bumps into him and he just fucking wrecks him because Joseph's an asshole.
Yeah. He's an old man now, but being an old man does not make him any less cool.
Yep. So
in fact, he's still the coolest in Arc 3 of the 2 JoJo's.
I will say it for the first half of part 3. I thought that was true, but I think in the second half, Jotaro kind of grows on me
a little bit.
Like the first half, there was a lot. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but it took a while for me to really warm up to Jotaro because he has this.
He's stoic.
He's stoic. The whole still waters run deep thing, but you don't ever get to the deep part.
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that Jotaro is going to be somewhat of a constant going into future series to some degree. He's not always there, but he's often there. And he's not always the main thing. But yes, he is still just like a stoic guy. And, he is iconic in the sense like his design is iconic and, his personality is somewhat iconic because he's the punk. It's kind of, or he pretends to be a punk more than anything. He just doesn't. He just really just doesn't give a shit and is just kind of just annoyed with people.
He's all tsundere with his mom.
Well, yeah. Well, he's the cool and quiet
not like
type.
I want to be a good son or anything. Then he is a good son.
It's not like I want to save your life.
He's a cool. He's a cool and quiet type, but they basically established that he's secretly just a huge nerd.
Kind of
deep down, but he just doesn't call attention to it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
And the ladies love him.
Women need to stop screaming around him. Okay.
So this gets us into part 3,
I just want to say I went
the whole thing up.
Yep.
It's just like
what?
I just remember going back to look at an episode. It's like the fourth one of part 3, and they're on the plane, and he just kind of pushes the lady over, and he's just like, "Get out of my way, bitch!" It's like, what?
yeah, he says a lot of that shit. It's like fucking women.
Because it's like by the second half of the series, it's like, what? How is he so mean?
He just doesn't give a shit. Like, that seems to be his thing. It's the main character who just doesn't give a shit about anything in front of him.
I mean, he's got morals and shit, and he gets really, he gets pissed off a lot, and he's not the guy you want to get pissed off ever.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
And that's a big thing they basically push out, more than, any of the previous JoJo's, he gets fucking pissed at times, and you don't want to fuck with him. And he doesn't get angry. He gets angry, but he's like a cool anger, and he's just gonna fucking wreck you.
It's a scarier kind of anger because you don't see it being expressed in that way.
No.
Yes.
He's just kind of quietly, just immediately mentally figuring out what thing he has to do to just wreck you, because he's so quiet and stoic that nobody can read him, even his allies. And they use it for a lot of comical effect. All the bluffing stuff is really interesting.
Yeah.
That's when it gets really good. But anyways, we should probably establish what the hell we're talking about.
Okay.
So we jump to Japan, and basically it turns out that Joseph's grandson, Jotaro, is in prison because he basically put himself in prison because he has this weird... He's basically saying that he's haunted by or possessed by a demon.
Yeah. And the demon just keeps bringing him stuff. So he has like a remote control car and just random crap.
Yeah, and it's just randomly in his cell. And basically, this is where Joseph establishes that over time he has developed, and apparently Jotaro has also developed, this thing called a stand, which is essentially the way they kind of rationalize it. It is a psychic manifestation of your soul, and it always has some sort of weird power in addition to that. So it can do psychic things where it can manipulate the environment like you, kind of like a psychokinesis where you can move things with your mind. But it looks like a weird man that stands behind you and can move around you.
Which is why they call it a stand.
Yep. And basically, the only thing that can damage stands are other stands, and only stand users can see stands. So people being around stand user would just see stuff being moved around by
or people flying or exploding or
so basically everybody else sees like the psychic powers, whereas the stand users see what the psychic powers look like, then they look like a weird dude usually.
And some of their powers are very oddly specific.
Yeah, well, part 3 is a lot more general stuff. It gets increasingly weirder as it goes on.
Yeah.
In part 3, we have, like Jotaro's basically just that it's really strong and fast and has high precision. It gets more later, but that's kind of his chick. Joseph's has basically he can
it's like a Indiana Jones whip that can also do psychic photography.
Yeah, it's specifically vines. Yes.
Yeah.
And those two stands are very relevant as goes forward. And at this time they also introduced one of my favorite characters of this part. Mohammed Abdul.
Yeah.
The basketball player.
Yes.
But basically,
I think you mean Abdul.
Yes.
No. Yes, Abdul. Yes. And who is a Egyptian man who is a former fortune teller who can summon a flaming stand that can set fire and stuff. And I fucking love him because he is such a smart ass in the best ways.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
And also, for the most part, at least in this arc, they are based off of the major arcana of the tarot.
Yeah, so all of them have stands, these stands, which replace the Hammon almost entirely, just because Joseph basically gave up on it.
He still uses it sometimes in near the end, because that's what makes him somewhat formidable against Dio for a little bit. But because Dio all stands at this point.
Yeah, because Dio, nobody bothered to keep up with the Hammon, and basically, it's not that super relevant. Joseph uses it a few times to do occasional Hammon tricks of like moving the water and stuff.
Yeah,
doing other weird stuff that he could used to do, though he's out of practice because he's been lazy. Because that is really kind of Joseph's personality, to be honest.
Yeah, and also he's goddamn old now.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, it's established that someone went in the Atlantic managed to dig up, found while doing salvage, found Dio's coffin, and inside was in fact Dio, now on Jonathan's body.
Yeah,
and by him somehow. John managed to get a stand, and this caused all of Jonathan's bloodline to spontaneously manifest a stand. And unfortunately, this includes, Jotaro's mother, who is not as strong-willed enough to actually maintain the stand without basically she's slowly dying because of it.
The stand is essentially killing her because there's a lot of stands, especially I think later, that aren't exactly benevolent or useful or good to the people that have them.
No, there's some that outright just kill their users immediately.
Yep.
So basically, it's this thing established, and they also say you have to have a strong will to manifest stand, because people choking causes their stand to go away because they can't breathe, and that can cause the stand to have issues. Them being knocked out causes the stand to go away. It's literally their will manifest.
Yeah.
And so basically, we start introducing at this point, a number of villains that become, protagonists.
Well, some become protagonists, some don't. You get Noriaki Kakuin, who is, I don't even know how to explain him. He's a very strange character.
He's kind of a weirdo, but with Kakuin, they kind of established that, unlike a lot of these characters who get their stands as, effects or because of reasons, he's had his stand his entire life. He just innately has psychic powers, and it's made him a bit of an outsider.
Yeah.
And then,
so he's kind of a subdued weirdo, is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, so he's just discovering the fact that he's discovering what it's like to have friends, sort of. and basically, Dio managed to use his fucked up, cells because he's a weirdo vampire, bio vampire,
mind controlled. Yeah. Well, so
Turn him
some of
evil.
the villains are mind controlled. Others are just assholes.
Yep. And Kakyoin's one of the ones that gets mind controlled. They save his life and basically swears to help them out. And they have a bunch of adventures, which I don't know how many of these we want to talk about.
We're not going to go through all of them, but just reference them. So then you get the other main character, Jean-Pierre Polnareff, who is
fucking amazing.
Yeah, so he's a French guy with another kind of guile-like haircut, and he's probably he's the comic relief of, I think, this arc.
I would also correct myself. He's the one that inspired that King of Fighters character I referenced.
Right.
Get the hair. But anyway,
so here's the thing. So like the general journey is they have to get to Egypt in order to defeat Dio within,
and it's a road trip.
Yeah, within 40 days,
60 days.
And the thing is, every single time they do something, like they go onto an airplane, like, or anything major, one of the Dio's stand users gets, happens to be there and just fucks everything up. So like an airplane crashes, a submarine isn't safe, like this, it's just constantly things getting in their way. So they encounter the last one that joins them from being an antagonist is Jean-Pierre Polnareff, who was he also mind controlled? Yeah, he was mind controlled.
Yes.
He wants to get vengeance for his sister that was killed by one of Dio's stand users. They encounter eventually a orangutan that can form a battleship in the sea, and that is his stand. Yep. And doesn't he have like the hat too? Like the orangutan, wasn't he wearing?
Well, yeah, he's a hat. He's smoking a pipe. He actually gets the actual captain's outfit. He's reading porn later. Gets a little creepy at times.
It's really weird.
They introduce like a young girl at roughly this time as well. That's hitchhiking for a while that they end up forgetting about.
Yeah, like
they just never bring her back.
Though eventually they get fucking tired of her showing up and literally just force her on a plane and send her back home.
That's right.
Get the fuck back to Hong Kong.
And that never goes anywhere though. Like,
no, she was just there for a while and then they send her back to Hong Kong.
Yep.
Like that's the kid I was referencing. Her just shows up.
There's always some kid there, and I'm trying to think of like some of the other stands they have. Like there's the guy with the gun that shoots like special bullets that he can direct.
Whole Horse, and he's amazing.
Who is also like basically a recurring character during this because everybody fucking loves Whole Horse. An interesting thing is that actually very few of the antagonists during this part actually die. I mean, there's some of them that Jotaro just fucking murders them, outright just fucking kills them. But it's not that common. Like they usually try to keep them alive,
Well, but like the series tells you under the corner where it says they're retired. Essentially,
yeah, it's like
they get so beaten that's like, okay, this person for now is not going to be a problem. Like one of them gets
all their bones have shattered
cars.
in hospital.
One of them, the one who can kind of create a mini sun, they just he
eventually gets heat stroke, I think.
Yeah, and that's it. They just go like, okay, bye, good luck. That's it.
Oh yeah, well no, they knock him out.
The evil baby that they just feed his.
Oh yeah, the evil baby that Polnareff basically says, "Hey, I'll find you if you do anything again and feed you more shit."
No, that wasn't Polnareff. That was Kakyoin.
No, that was Kakyoin. Yeah, that's right.
Kakyoin feeds the baby his own feces by mixing it.
That baby fucking sucked.
Did they just leave the baby in the
desert?
No.
They handed it off to someone, and they're sort of like, you fucking.
Kakyoin says, like, if you do anything again, I'll find you. It basically scared him straight.
That's right.
Like
that happens
when they run
lot.
out of, they eventually run out of tarot cards to theme these off, so they just start doing the Thoth deck, so they all have like weirder powers beyond that.
Well, they after they do the tarot cards, they start doing Egyptian gods.
Yeah, but that's the part of the Thoth deck.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the last, and then at the end they have one band. No, they have a couple band stuff. They have tenor sax, which isn't named. And then
Vanilla
they have,
Ice.
That's his stand's Cream.
Oh, right. Yes.
Which is a different band.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Dio's stand is the world because his stand
it's the final in the major arcana.
Yeah, and it's the ultimate stand.
The world.
Yep. Toki wo tamari.
You did that better than I could have.
So yeah, they go on this long adventure, and there's a bunch of turns here, and they eventually get to Egypt.
And they get a dog who can also. Their animals can also use stands. So there's this really asshole hawk. There's the dog Iggy for Iggy Pop, who what's his the fool. That's his is the fool.
The fool. Yep, which you make sand stuff, and the dog's an asshole, and they basically managed to bribe him using coffee flavored chewing gum.
Yep, and he really likes farting in people's faces.
Well,
yes,
not people's
specifically
faces,
Paul
Nareff's face.
Well, yeah, he really hates Paul Nareff a lot.
Well, he warms up to him with time, you know.
Eventually,
he ultimately sacrifices himself, but
and the other running gag is Paul Nareff can never find a toilet that functions, or something bad always happens to him when he's trying to find a toilet.
I mean, there's so many good like episodic just like adventures that they have during this like entire road trip. Like a lot of it's like, you know, them ending up in a country, like what is this weird custom that this country has? Oh God, they have pig toilets. Oh God, the pig's head sticking out. Paul Rudd's just like, oh God, no, what is going on in my life? And then like someone shows up like, oh, if it comes out, you have to just start kicking it down. And Paul Nerf's like, I don't need to go to the bathroom anymore.
And there's a lot of just little adventures that they go on because like the first part of the series is like 9 episodes. The next is 17, and this is 47.
It's a
47,
lot longer.
Something like that. It's a lot longer than anything we've seen so far. And every little villain again takes like 2 episodes, maybe more.
There's a few 3-parters, but
I think there's only a couple 3-parters in this one. But God,
except for Dio.
Yeah, well, Dio being the final villain, it takes a bit of time.
Yes, and just there's a lot of little adventures and a lot of dudes I didn't remember. Like again, the person on the plane. That's just like a bug that wants to cut off your tongue.
Yeah, it's literally the size of a fly.
Yes.
Yep.
The tower. I think that's it. That's that one.
Yep. Tower of Grey.
Yes.
I mean, there's like I could just go through all stands. I don't know how necessary.
No,
you don't really need to.
I think keeping it vague as possible.
I was just trying to
keeps it funny.
I mean, do we want to talk a bit more about these other characters? Like Paul Nerf's whole thing is like his sister was killed by a stand user,
a man with 2 left hands.
Yep, and eventually, of course, he shows up, and basically, apparently, as part of this, they have Abdul gets killed by a whole horse with his gun because of the other guy, and Paul Nerf gets pissed and manages to kill the guy especially hard. Like he gets killed actual dead,
especially hard,
very hard,
very very hard, and his stand was interesting because that's the one that lives in reflections and stuff.
Yeah.
That episode's very close to the one time Joseph does the next you're going to say.
Yeah.
So because he only says it once in this series, and it's very disappointing that he doesn't say it more times.
Hey man, they don't want to overdo it a bit. Every bit.
I understand.
Here's the thing: is he would end up stealing the show too much.
Yep.
So they only have him beat, I think, a couple of them, and again, mostly through tricks because his stand is very much not battle oriented at all.
Though he had some of the best episodes, like you had the one with what was I forget what her stand was.
It's the one where he fills out the map and then he gets the
Bastet,
guy.
The magnet one, where he and Abdul get magnetized and they're trying to get around to beat up her while they're getting stuck to every metal, and eventually they're gonna just get crushed by like a train and shit.
Yeah.
That those 2 episodes were just fantastic, just goofy.
Yes.
Like, the goofiest adventure, and then they had their plan. And it is fucking. It's so good. It's
also his random swearing in English is great.
Yep.
He just goes, "Oh my god!
Holy shit!
Holy shit!
Son of a bitch!
Oh no!"
He just has the best reactions throughout the entire series. It's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Abdul also has a bunch of that, too, where he just says, "Yes, I am."
Yes. They were basically all awkward nerds in one way or the other.
Yeah, well, yeah, they literally call attention to that. In fact, when they, at the very end episode where they're calling it, it's like, "Oh, are you actually, Joseph, it's like, who made, the song Beat It,
who made the parody song Beat It, Eat It?
Yeah.
Al Yankovic.
It's like, only you would know stupid crap like that.
Which was great seeing Weird Al tweeting that shit.
Yes, he tweeted it.
But yeah, it's great adventure. I mean, how did you guys like part 3 compared to part 1 and part 2?
I liked it because the battles were again even more puzzle like. And I like that aspect, is like they're trying to use the tools that they have around them to get their way out of the situation, and that ends up being a lot more interesting than like, like the more typical shonen thing where it's like, my power level's 8,000. Well, mine's 8,005. I beat you. And that gets very boring.
How do you feel about this, HulkaMatt? Because I know you really liked, Joseph and the Part 2 stuff.
Oh, I think if you were to just ask me straight up which one I liked more, I'd probably say Part 2, but Part 3, Part 3 really, really grows on me in the second half, because, I mean, in the first part you have Jonathan and, like, William Zeppeli. In the second part you have Joseph and Caesar. This one you have 5 to 6 protagonists.
You have an ensemble,
you have like this whole posse, and it really takes a while to warm up to every single one of them, because they have to like introduce like just who they are, and I feel like they take a really long time before you really get to know them. But by the time the second part comes around, you really warm up to every single character, especially Polnareff. I think Kakyoin kind of they try and like give Polnareff the image of a guy who's not really too smart, I guess. Like he's a good guy, but
he's a big dummy.
At the same time, Kakyoin just kind of turns into like this guy who doesn't really do anything.
Yeah,
and, like he never succeeds. I mean, whereas Polnareff occasionally does. But
Kakyoin ends up being the ultimate savior, kind of, in the end.
Oh yeah, he definitely does. But
he doesn't get many victories otherwise.
I mean, he has his own episode.
Second part, I don't think he got one.
I mean, he has his own episode things where like he's the one facing like baby. He beats that baby.
Yeah.
They all get their own episode, but yeah, I agree. His personality is the least.
It's not developed.
Least defined.
I mean, overall, like it's a lot harder.
I mean, they give him a little bit of stuff when he's dying and this sort of stuff. I was so lonely. Thank you for giving me friends. Blah. That's kind of it.
You've got to.
There's a great episode where there's someone imitating him and being a weirdo, and then afterwards he's also being a weirdo, and then Jotaro's just pissed about it.
Yeah, because he's like,
But Part 3 eventually really grew on me to the point where it's kind of a toss up between 2 and 3. I think I'll go with 2 just because, like, as my favorite, just because young Joseph was an amazing character.
And to be fair, like Part 3 has a lot of fun standalone villains, but the Pillar Men were really goofy in a way, and like they're really iconic in a way that's interesting. Part 3 had a lot of kind of throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah, well,
because they're kind of experimenting with concepts.
I like the concept of stands. That's the thing I really like from 3. But I agree with you that I think Joseph is a better protagonist, or at least more interesting to watch on his own. In Part 2, Part 3 would be unwatchable without the other characters around Jotaro, because Jotaro on his own, he can't carry audience interest.
Sure,
I think there's like a thing with Jotaro where you never really feel like even though there are points where he's like in trouble, you never really feel like he's in danger
until the end.
Until the end, which makes for a better fight in the end. But
yeah, where he's doing like crazy shit, like stopping his own heart and shit, with like fucking manhandling his heart in order to
like it's kind of surreal to see. Actually,
but that's like but that's also kind of like how he is as like personality, is like kind of like how he solves problems, is like the most brute force kind of like okay, there's only one way to solve this. He immediately thinks of the way to do it, which is a little, that's kind of how JoJo plots going forward, and sort of like, okay, there's only one real way to solve this puzzle. I have to figure it out. And, Jotaro is kind of the first example of that to some degree.
Kind of. But you know what I would say? Jotaro, he does, like, come up with interesting plans, but they're not intricate. I would say Joseph's kind of solutions are a Rube Goldberg machine.
Sure.
Versus Jotaro is very much a person who cuts to the core very quickly. It's blunt but brilliant at the same time. But he doesn't set up a whole bunch of things and then you watch it come together.
No.
Like that's what makes Joseph's stuff interesting, is because you very much get that he is planning a lot of moves ahead from the start, and he's kind of doing small little tricks to then finally come up with the solution. So you see it kind of in slow motion, him winning in that way.
Right.
Whereas Jotaro
is he kind of wins, and you figure out in hindsight how he did it. Like, oh,
yeah. And that's to me not as interesting. Again, I like the stands because I think they add that nice puzzle element. They work as an interesting tool, and the way they set up those situations with those kind of strange powers and abilities provides scenarios that are interesting to watch them navigate. But in terms of protagonist and I think villains, yes, I definitely agree with you guys that part 2 is more interesting in that regard.
I will say that I think the first episode where I really started to like Jotaro was the one against Darby the Gambler.
Right. That's a good one.
It's a really good episode, and the ending, like the way he got around defeating Darby at the end, where he's just like, oh man, that really could have been bad.
Both Darby episodes are really good because there's the Darby, which is the gambler, and then you have his younger brother Terrence,
the gamer.
And both those episodes, and I like that one because that's a good one with it has both JoJo's working together in that latter one, which is really, I love that one had a brilliant solution.
I mean, there were some.
Yes.
I mean, there were some really just random fights. There were random stuff I really liked. I liked the stuff with God, what's her stand? Justice with Enya, who's important.
Right.
Empress? Enya.
Enya, who's Justice. She was the one where we basically had the thing with her trying to kill Polnareff without anybody noticing. And basically, the entire episode is all from her perspective, or several episodes of basically her just slowly trying to work towards killing them. And it's like, oh no, I'm not doing anything suspicious back here. I'm just working this hotel. Go back to your room. There's nothing wrong back here. Ignore the screaming.
I'm just an old woman. Don't mind me.
I'm okay. And I mean, that sort of stuff.
Creepy.
I mean, that sort of stuff is like also examples of stuff I like about Jotaro, because Jotaro's immediately suspicious, but he doesn't let it on.
Yes.
He just kind of just like walks back and it's like, oh, I didn't actually leave.
You can see it
what
in his
up?
face.
Yeah, his poker face is definitely something he uses as a tool.
I mean, the other example of that is, I think with Lovers, the one where he puts his stand in like I believe it was in Joseph's brain.
Yes.
So you had like the arc of him, being asked to do shit to hurt himself while, the other two are trying to get the stand out of Joseph's brain.
Yes.
And then at the end, he just fucking punches him through a fucking clock tower to death.
Yeah. That's like, the one where he gets pissed off, and it's amazing. That's actually one of the times where I kind of like Jotaro is when he does get pissed off, and you just know something is coming.
It's really quiet about it.
Something, and
you
know
see him
it's
like
horrible.
You just know it's like, when this ends up, I'm going to kill you, right? You are going to literally die. I'm going to punch you to death. Like that was the best example of like the second gambling episode with like the racing thing. It's like you're not going to do the aura thing to me, right? Like yes. Just kind of like, oh god, no. It's like, oh, punch
again,
like the fucking
voice
shreds.
In some of these, it's so good.
Like absolutely, the voice acting is perfect.
The yes, no thing is just, it works so well because again, it's very much over the top.
Yep. I really hope there's nothing confirmed yet, but I really, really hope they get a chance to do part 4, because part 4 takes all the stuff you guys have been saying and just like makes it gravy. Like part 4 is.
Well, I know nothing about it except the new JoJo's name.
Like
that's about, and I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm not gonna say it.
Josuke.
Yeah, Josuke.
Josuke.
Yep.
All right.
So basically, it takes all the stuff you're saying about having a better JoJo protagonist, and also having the stand plot lines, and they dialed down the number of stands slightly, but dial up the quantity or the quality, and also how often they show up at times. really, really good. It is my favorite part of JoJo, and I hope they adapt it well. Uh,
Well, do you
speaking
do
of
you
part,
think that, I mean, it has the anime been doing well enough to have them adapt further ones? I mean, I think
I
it's been
mean,
doing fairly well.
it's been doing pretty decent, but it's all up to Araki's whim. And
Yeah.
it depends how much money, who knows how how things are going. I think the fact that, I mean, I would think it'd be very smart of them to keep making it, simply because this is finally the thing that is causing JoJo to break out over here in the West. This is the thing that's finally making it a thing. Like, it's been a thing in Europe for a while. Like,
Well, yeah.
it's been a thing. It's only not made it over here. Like, they make a joke about this actually in part 4 and stuff. Like, there's a mangaka character who is not quite Araki in part 4 because he's more of a dick than Araki is, because Araki's a really nice guy. Like, Araki later comments on the fact, like, oh, this character isn't supposed to be me. I'm not that intimidating, guys. You don't have to be afraid of me. He makes a comment about where a character asks, like, oh, why don't you put your manga out in English, in America? It's like, it's too sophisticated for these rubes over in America. That's a joke they make. But, it's kind of like that sort of thing. Like, it's never managed
Europe has
to...
also been into the translation of manga game just longer than the US has. I mean, like, they catch up to the mainline series, like, almost immediately in print form. Whereas here, you have to sometimes wait months or years for them to even get close to it.
And also, European tastes in terms of anime and manga seem to align a lot better with Japan's, whereas the US has a lot of stuff where the US picks, like, what US picks as being good sometimes does not align with what Japan and the rest of the world does. A good example is every country in the world loves One Piece, except for the US, apparently. One Piece is fantastic, but One Piece hasn't gotten shit for anywhere in the US, in part because the anime adaptations have been not so great, and they kind of fucked it up early on, so they've basically... On the other hand, Naruto is way popular over here, whereas the rest of the world, not as much.
And also, we kept Bleach on TV for years for some unidentifiable reason.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, there are certain stuff like, Attack on Titan is big everywhere, so we're starting to align more just because simulcasting releases are making that a lot easier. So my thought is, it would be very smart for Araki to enable the anime to continue, simply because it's allowing the manga and the merchandise to start being bought over here. People are buying JoJo merchandise over here by the tons. People
and I know
they're
finally releasing the manga in actual, like, decent print form now. Like, they're showing up in some of the libraries are picking up copies of it now.
Yeah, I highly recommend.
Zorak sent me the first part of Phantom Blood, and the back of it has Dio holding Danny, carrying him somewhere.
The fun things about it is, like, those re-releases are in hardcover, and they all have Araki drawing the old characters in his current style, and they look nothing like they used to look. It's really funny. Like Dio.
Oh yeah, Iggy used to look. We barely touched on Iggy, but Iggy apparently used to look.
Oh no! Like, in the anime, ugly, like, right? they have his. He looks like how he originally drew him, and then over time in the anime, they make it more similar to how he's drawn as well. So, like, Iggy in the comics changes, like, facial shape throughout that, and they did the same thing in this version too.
Yeah, they just do
a bit. A dog, by the way.
Well, they just do it bit by bit over time, where people don't necessarily notice. But if you look at side by side, it's like, wow, he was really ugly later on, and wow, he's got like a human face now. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's really weird. And again, like, and normally what an anime would do is like, okay, that's the final version. We'll kind of start from there. No, they just kept it. Like, they were like, no, we're going to be kind of true to the comic.
I really wonder how they're going to handle that for part 4.
Because characters change shape, don't they? Like, after becoming, like, becoming friends, like, their proportions change, right?
Well, characters kind of proportions change all the time, essentially, as to, like, comical effect. Like, oh, hey, this is more of the lighthearted stuff. Everybody's a little stubbier, necessarily. But yes, like, when things get serious, everybody gets elongated, essentially. It looks cool, and it fits well, but it's also just kind of like, oh, wait, wasn't that guy kind of tall? Wait, he's, like 4 foot tall now. What the fuck? Like, he looked tall before. And it's like, kind of like, oh, I guess not. I mean, I never had a good frame of reference, I guess, but I look forward to seeing how they handle it. if they lock them to a same design, it will make sense, but I will also be sad because there's a lot of interesting stuff what they do with that sort of thing. Like everybody's character designs change a lot. Even like the JoJo, even like Josuke's design in Part 4 changes a lot in terms of like the core design stays the same, but like the body structure changes where it's at the start it's very like Jotaro level, like really buff, and eventually over time everybody gets a little lankier and they go into the modern JoJo. Everybody is slick and cool, not necessarily super muscly. Nobody's
like
ever buff
I
anymore.
heard that the art style changes like halfway through.
It's not like a harsh cut. It's a slow evolution over time.
Yeah.
And you know, it's by the end, you know, I mean, stand designs all stay the same. They don't get super weird and, you know, different. So, I mean, this is the part where stands start getting really weird. That
Their
part 5
abilities.
is where they,
yeah.
Yep. Part 5 is the one after that. This is where they get just fucking mental though. So it's not quite mental yet, but it's getting there. And part 4 has a lot of weird
Zorak,
stands.
would you say they're weird?
Yes. I mean, part 5 has jokes about how certain stands in part 5 don't make a lot of sense. Like if you try like writing it down, like none of this makes any sense. How does this stand work? None of this makes any sense. It's so confusing. Not even the audience can understand it. It makes sense if you think about it the right way, but a lot of people are really, really confused by some stands in part 5. But that won't be for like, you know, half a decade or whatever. So whatever.
Well,
so that doesn't matter.
Either way, I really hope so. And again, like I love this series not because it's like super deep or anything, but because as a spectacle, and when I say as a spectacle, I don't mean like the train crash kind of spectacle, which is fun in a different way. But this one, in terms of just it's like pure theater, I think is one way of saying it in a more positive connotation. There, it's outrageous in all the good ways. It has a sense of humor. It has a sense of dramatics. It often, I mean, some of the compositions and the character like design is really good. Like I love the fact that unlike, you know, a lot of anime, like the characters' faces are really well constructed. Like there's a degree of specificity to the form that I really appreciate in this type of thing.
It's got a lot of ugly people.
And it has, I mean, yeah, a lot of the characters look very different. They're very recognizable. They aren't just the same character with a different haircut. Yep. And that's something I think was really, really nice to see, because it's very rare to see that in a lot of the Japanese anime. I mean, I think some authors and some studios are better at it than others, but like for a long time, that was a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely want to see more of it. I hope it does well. I think it is doing fairly well. I mean, as you were saying, the fact that it has come over to the U.S. and it's able to be like shown to people in like various GIF forms and like on Tumblr or social media and things like that, it's bringing to light this series that really hasn't been noticed that much other than as like an underground thing. And that's definitely a really powerful marketing tool for the entire JoJo industry behind it.
I mean, it's certainly influential. Like, there's references to JoJo now in like Western animation and stuff. Like, you know, that's weird, but it's starting to happen.
Yeah. Well, then we're also seeing references of Western animation in anime now too. Like, in that Little Witch Academy thing, there's characters from Steven Universe and Gravity Falls that show up in the background.
That's cool. I like that.
And you don't even notice them; they just look like regular kids. But if you freeze frame it, you go, "Oh, that's Connie," or "That's the two characters from Gravity Falls." There's a bunch of the kids in the background, like so. There's references to that. I mean, it's kind of like when you saw South Park references in Fooly Cooly.
Mm-hmm.
But so,
can I just
yeah, go ahead.
Can I just ask a quick question? So this series is still going on.
Yep.
Kind of. Yes and no.
Do you still keep up with it? Do you still keep up with it?
I do.
Zorak, at all?
Yeah, I do.
You do. How is it still like really, really good, even in like whatever part they're on now?
Yes, it is still very good. It does do a weird shtick where after a certain point, it actually JoJo up until like part. I'm thinking part of the numbering. Part
it's
7.
Stone Ocean, right? Is the one where it does is the last one that's in this kind of vein.
Well, let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. More like it goes monthly. It's used to be a weekly comic, and then in Steel Ball Run,
2004.
yeah, it goes monthly. So for the last decade, it's been monthly. So for the second half of here's the thing about it. For the first half of JoJo, we have about 5 or 6 different parts or so that are weekly.
Okay.
After it goes monthly, we've had 1.5 parts.
Mm.
So the release schedule has slowed down a lot. So it's still going, and it's still as fantastic as it always has. It's just that instead of it being weekly and you getting 14 pages a week, we now get 40 to 80 pages a week, and the pacing hasn't necessarily kept up with it to some degree. Where it's not like a lot of stuff is happening, they're just having more detail about what's happening, and that's fine. It's still really, really good. The comic is still great. Steel Ball Run is for a lot of people their favorite part altogether.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people really like. Well, I think the argument people say often is that Part 4 has a lot of the best characters in the best setting, but Steel Ball Run actually has the best story.
Okay.
And it has dinosaurs.
No, well,
now I'm excited.
we won't see Steel Ball Run for ages.
But you can find translated versions of it to read it if you're interested. But
sure,
in terms of animation format, I mean, it would be awesome if it gets to that point. I mean,
I would love to. That'd be great.
I will say, part of me really wants to just read Part 4 because I mean, who knows if we're gonna
it's been so built up,
and
yep,
and it's been so built up also. But another part of me has really enjoyed watching it week to week with Zorak.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I still think the manga is the superior form just because the art style is really good and the art is really good. At the same time, I think for Part 1 and Part 2, I think the anime is probably actually better, just a better way to consume it.
Yeah.
For Part 3, I you could go either way. I think the anime has a lot of really nice stuff and it's great. The thing is, reading the manga doesn't necessarily stop you from reading the anime or watching the anime. You won't be as surprised by oh my god, what the hell is going on here? But you'll still have that with the manga, and then with the anime, you just get to see, oh man, I can't wait to see how they're going to show off this thing. This will be great. I'm really excited for the Part 4 anime, and I literally just reread the manga for that like a couple weeks ago. It's and I'm still excited for it because it's still really good because the level of polish is fantastic, and seeing how David Production is actually producing it is interesting. I really want to see how they're going what Western song they're going to choose for the ending theme now, because for
right.
Part 3 they did Long Train Home
and
Walk Like an Egyptian
yes.
as well. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing what the hell they're going to do for Part 4, seeing as how it's the late 90s, set in the late 90s, even 1999 or whatever.
Oh, man.
There's also a scene that's perfectly set up for them using the song Highway Star if they can get it. I really hope they can manage to get the rights to that song to use it for one scene.
Yeah.
I want that more than the world. But I hope they do it justice. I hope it happens. I mean, there was things and photos of them in the town that was the basis for it, a couple months ago, doing on quote unquote vacation. All of them on vacation at the same time in this town. Kind of suspicious. But they could also be doing fact finding this, try to do the pitch. We'll see. There is a apocryphal rumor out of some convention or the other that they're having trouble getting the rights, but that seems like kind of like the bullshit Reddit rumor that seems very likely to be entirely fake.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much worth value there is worth putting in on that. We'll see if it happens. JoJo is definitely worth checking out. Even though we've spoiled a lot of what happens in JoJo during this entire discussion, it's still really worth checking out because it's that dang good. Knowing everything,
absolutely,
knowing everything that happens changes nothing. I mean,
it's all
sure,
the,
you don't get
the
surprises.
little touches that they put into it. It's the visual flourishes, the way they pick the colors. Again, the voice acting I think adds a lot to what's going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the ways I think it does differentiate itself from the manga. Because here's the thing: a manga will always have kind of superior art usually it has the better art just because they don't have to take responsible for making it move. so they can put in all the details and all the structure and all that stuff that they want. But with animation, you really can't get away with that much detail unless you're going to spend like a ton of money on it. So art wise, usually the manga are going to be better, but in this case, this adaptation both I think does it justice, even if maybe the art isn't exactly the same, but it's the extra small little touches they add to it that make it worth watching.
The thing is, there's also a lot of those small touches in the manga itself, and not all of them are actually carried over to some degree, because there's a lot of weird details like that are touched on. I mean, we'll see how it works with Part 4 in particular, because Part 4 has a lot of interesting little weird stuff that they put in. Also, if you read the manga, you get the author notes that are accompany it.
Yeah.
I'm going to quick boot up the author notes for Part 3, because these author notes are fucking incredible, by the way. I recommend looking these up, because they're all just fantastic. Let's see if I can find just a random one.
In the meantime, I would just like to say that I really do hope Adult Swim or something like that picks this up, because it would be a really good fit, I think, for them, because they like the action stuff for the most part. I think it would kind of fit that sensibility for the Adult Swim kind of thing. I just like it better than some of the other series they've had on. So it would be a good choice for them to do that type of thing. I mean, it beats the hell out of Sword Art Online. That piece of crap. Find any good notes yet?
Let's see.
Come on.
I've got working on it.
You're on the spot, man.
So HulkaMatt, as a guy who doesn't anime watch a lot, what does this make you want to check out more anime, or is this still kind of like, I don't know, man. Fuck.
This is the exception.
I've kind of warmed up to anime over the years in general. When I watch Neeksy.
Oh,
sure.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. But I mean, I did cancel my Crunchyroll account the second that it ended.
That did happen, yeah. I mean, to be fair,
I did ask you. I was like, is there any reason for me to be subscribed to this still?
Probably not. I mean, because like most of the stuff coming out, I don't think it was anything you'd be particularly interested in, and there's not even stuff I canceled my account. I'll start it up again when there's something on there I care about. But the issue is that everything's spread across different streaming services. Like, we'll see what gets Dragon Ball Super, or shows I care about necessarily.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of. I mean.
That's the annoying thing. It's just like
everything.
It's like having cable, where you get a whole bunch of channels that you're not interested in, but in order to kind of keep up with the ones you do, you have to just subscribe anyway. But it's easier to cancel and restart an online streaming account than it is to cancel and restart like a cable contract.
Okay, I got a note for you guys real quick. Here's a note from volume 37. Here's a mystery from my daily life. Every night at 9 and 11 p.m., the people who live on the floor under my studio always open up the window to the veranda and bang on something wooden, quote unquote, exactly twice, never 3 times. Knock, knock. Then they slam the window shut again. This knock, knock sound reverberates through that night sky. What could they possibly be doing? And this happens every night. And there's also extensive
it reminds
things.
Me of the Junji Ito Cat Diary kind of comic,
which are coming out this October
Yes.
in the U.S. Oh, so good. But there's also stuff of him talking about all the weird bugs he's seen in his studio, and just like, he's such a great guy. He seems so fun. I love him.
Well,
I love Araki so much.
To make something this fabulous and unhinged and just zeitgeisty, like, you kind of have to be that kind of person to do that.
Well, there's one thing I do not like about this man.
Oh.
Kills too many dogs.
see, it's because he loves dogs. He knows that the dogs are the key to your heartstrings. That, like, oh, we need to hate this guy. Hey, let's have him kill a dog. That'll work.
Or maybe he's more of a cat person. Equally plausible.
There's that whole saying where it's like, I don't care who dies as long as the dog lives. Not here.
There's
he
will kill every dog.
I've got a good note here, by the way, another one out of volume 34. For 60 years, my father thought that we called the mailbox the mail bin. He must have had a lot of opportunities to realize he was making a mistake, so it's been almost a miracle that he managed to call it a mail bin for 60 years. But I'd also been calling the movie The Day of the Jackal, which I've seen more than 10 times, The Eye of the Jackal, for the longest time. I also thought the manga Dokuban was Dokubeso, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
See, these are the kind of things you're missing by not checking out the manga.
Well, I'll look back into that.
Yeah,
I mean, the part,
I might have
I
to
think
skip ahead just because, like, I don't want to have to wait for part 4 to get adapted.
we'll probably if we are getting part 4, this is completely me crystal balling out of like my ass essentially, using my ass ball. So I'm gonna guess that if we are going to get a part 4 anime, we're going to get an announcement within this year, and we will have it starting, say, winter of next year.
Can't wait.
So a little over a year. No, it is what it is.
We'll see what I do by then. And
hey, animation's expensive.
But-
it takes time.
Yep.
again, really enjoyed everything about this show. I love the music. I love the characters. I was debating watching the entire series again before you had me on for this episode, but I didn't want to do that in 3 days. And
what kind of broken person you would become? Like how the way you would view the world, you know, after having been through like 3 straight arcs, just watching days straight, your perception of reality just falls apart.
I should point out that a friend of mine, he had heard about the series, and he decided he was gonna, and he was telling me he was watching, and he was on like the 3rd episode of the first part, and I was like, oh, I'll watch with you. This was like at 11 p.m. and next thing we know, it's 5 a.m. and we're into the 2nd part, and he's just like, I really want to watch more, but I have to work in like an hour.
And that's when he calls in sick for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
I mean,
he never made it back to that job. He just sits there staring into space. The wondrous things he must see through those JoJo eyes of his. Mysteries.
But yeah, I loved it, and I really hope there's more, because I kind of can't wait for more.
Yeah, there's nothing else that's like it out there at the moment. Well, I mean again, besides
like it, yeah.
Persona 4, but that's a different beast.
I mean, there are certain stuff that have a sort of similar style or a similar aesthetic, but nothing is quite like this.
Well, I would say both nothing that has the same style and tone.
Sure.
Because the stuff that tries to be like that is usually even more silly comedy-wise than what this is.
Sure.
So, like, this one balances the tone in a unique way.
Well, stuff is either too silly, or it's not
it's not silly enough, and it doesn't take itself seriously enough with the silliness,
or in the right way.
Yeah.
Where they basically, I mean, with a lot of these fantasy anime, just think of any sort of fantasy, school anime you've seen, or whatever, fantasy teen anime. Like, they're almost all just super unrealistic and don't feel grounded. That's really a key thing of JoJo, is that even with all the weird shit going on at all basis, at all the time, everybody's immediately going, "What the fuck? Like, I'm trying to eat this hamburger over here, and you're causing shit to catch fire. What the hell, man?"
The characters are aware of how weird this shit is. So, like, there's
the
a
world
reality,
is normal around them.
So there's a reality to juxtapose with the insanity.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, like, it keeps it from getting unhinged.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not JoJo's Unhinged Adventure. That'd be messed up.
He would be a snake.
Oh man.
Just eating lots of eggs and
so
animals.
So we're saying that if there the JoJo Bizarre Adventure game we should get, that's what you're implying, to be one directed by Hideo Kojima, which is entirely accurate. That ain't wrong.
Equally unaging.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes an eternal one to know an eternal one.
They also have really weird styles. They both got this sort of weird they both have this unreal reality going on.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Makes you think.
Yeah. So I think that should be it. Do you got anything to plug, either of you guys?
You can follow me on Twitter at HulkaMatt. That's about it, though.
No other projects at the moment?
No other projects. I do have work in a few hours.
Right. Well, okay. So
that's a project.
You can always email us at adthepodcast@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, which makes it a lot easier than checking Twitter for when a new episode comes up because it will download it for you automatically. If you could also rate and review on iTunes, it helps a lot, gives us feedback, and for some weird algorithm thing, iTunes, it prefers people who rate and review shit like that. So that would be helpful. You can reach my Twitter at rymagnuson. And also, I have an art piece that's still up at the Meltdown show. It is the only Perfect Blue based piece. It's a show called In the Year 1990X. It's basically a show where people interpret the various anime from the 1990s. So there's a lot of really great pieces there. I can't recall off the top of my head how long it's going to be there, but it should still be in the Meltdown showroom. So that's in LA or in Hollywood.
Check that out.
Yep.
You could,
and I just want to say thank you one more time for having me on.
Oh no, it's great
because I really enjoyed the show. I still haven't listened to the B movie one yet, but I'm really excited to. I just haven't had the time. When you announced that one, I was like, oh my god, I cannot wait for this. I could see that smug fucking B's face right now.
My live tweet Meltdown, I think, got a lot of people excited about that.
But I'm pretty pumped to listen to
that
tomorrow as I'm driving to work.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're enjoying it, HulkaMatt. And
I'm glad you enjoy our suffering. Sociopath. All of you are fucking sociopaths.
Also, HulkaMatt, I'm very glad that you have decided to join me also for JoJo Times consistently on a weekly basis.
Yes.
That was really fun. Yes, and folks, you can reach me on Twitter at Zorak. And let's wrap this up with an Iraqi quote. Here's a mystery from my daily life. Once when I got out of the pool soaking wet, a friend of mine said, "Man, your hair looks just like Goku Raku-kun," and fell over laughing. Who the hell is Goku Raku-kun? Is the main character some manga or something I never heard of? Now I know Shinigami-kun, Enma-kun, Akuma-kun, Jojoku-kun, but who the hell is Goku Raku-kun? And what kind of hair does he have? Later I asked him about it, but he didn't remember saying it.
All right, well.
Sounds like a good man.
Yeah, so join us next week for... What was it again?
We will be covering Inside Out, Pixar's newest film, and then after that we will be covering a special, it was an OVA, right?
Yes.
Black Lion.
You can find it on the internet if you search hard enough. You can't purchase it anymore, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Whereas Inside Out is, at least as the time of recording, in theaters and doing very, very well. So
as Pixar films do.
Yep. Well, this one especially, more so than some of their previous ones. So I have to go out and I have to go find a theater that has it at the right time. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody.